And she also grabs a great Kool-Aid as she races by. Now there's Todd. Ahoy, losing.
Logos! In the year of our Lord 2025, I'm not really that into them anymore.
How dare you?
Yeah, that's correct, ladies and gentlemen. My interest in logos has kind of waned. The last time I really had any interest, you've got to go all the way back to January when that was found. And then, of course, you have the B plot, where I was recruited by the then VGAC to determine whether or not Window Films actually existed. Spoiler alert. Yeah, it turns out it was about as existent as my love and passion for logos is these days. Okay, I'll stop. Don't get myself wrong. I haven't completely lost interest in logos. They're just not really something I could see myself dedicating all of my free time, any free time I have during towards like I do trains or sirens or sleeping in. I'm still into them, it's just nothing has really happened. It's going to take discovering the DTS water drop or something like that for myself to really get brought back into the fold. However, I will continue to produce logo-related content for the sake of the 98% of my audience that really only comes here for logos. With that said and done, ladies and gentlemen, it's been far too long since you guys voted for this. Let's get into the feature presentation.
And now our feature presentation.
What the f*** are you looking at?
Welp, here it is. This is what you voted for in a landslide. One of the most overdone and overrated conversation pieces in this logo community that I refuse to associate with because communities are cringe. Yep, here we go, everybody. Everybody that's anybody has done one of these. Go up in the search bar up there, type in top 10 scariest logos, and you'll get about 27,462 different results. Everybody that's anybody in this community has produced one of these opinion pieces. And seeing that I've been involved on YouTube now for nearly 2 decades, this year my account will be old enough to join the military, by the way. I figured I was overdue to give my own take on this piece. Before we get into it though, here's a few ground rules. First off, we're featuring 17 logos in this countdown. You want to know why? Because everybody does 10. 10 logos is not enough to tell a story. And second, you may notice the title says Uncanny. No, it has nothing to do with those stupid Mr. Incredible memes that took over the internet years ago. As previously mentioned in an older subscriber spectacular, my definition of scary actually refers to things that can hurt you. People are afraid of spiders. Yeah, they bite you and they're poisonous. Spiders are scary. Snakes? Yeah, they can also bite you and they're also poisonous. Spiders or snakes are definitely scary. My longtime childhood fear of the earth hurtling into the sun? Yeah, that is especially scary. Logos, on the other hand, they're not going to hurt you. They're simple advertisement pieces for the company that just produced the media you're about to consume, or in most cases, the media you just got done consuming. Nothing less, nothing more. As someone who used to work in television, I can promise you right now that the executives do not have a secret portal that's going to bring their logo into the world for the mere purpose of terrorizing you. The V of Doom is not going to crash through your television. The S from Hell is not going to jump out of your tablet. The THX Deep Note isn't going to breach your phone. The Deke logo is not going to manifest outside of your bedroom window tonight. And I guarantee you there is no WGBH logo waiting under your bed to strangle you. They're simple advertisements for the production company that made what you just got done watching. That's it. And to further prove my point that logos are not going to hurt you, I have one in my hands right here. This right here is the Viacom V of Doom, one of the OG scary logos. I hate using slang. And I'm going to slam it against my head to prove to you right now that they're not going to hurt you. In fact, I'll get up close so you can see it. Okay, so a bit slight discomfort, but other than that, nothing really harmful. The logo's not hurting us, it's the actual film. Unless you're in a dark alley at 2 in the morning and you get mugged by someone wearing a B&D mask, which to be fair, you kind of deserve it because what are you doing in a dark alley at 2 in the morning? They're not going to hurt you. That's it. Still, nonetheless, there are a few out there that do leave a rather uneasy feeling. And those 17 logos are going to be what we discuss in this special. Alright, I'm pretty sure you guys are sick and tired of my rambling. This is the second open you've had to go through. So without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? By the way, for those who are interested, it's kind of hard to see, but there you go. It is the V of Doom. Right, let's get into this thing, shall we? Bet you're surprised to see this one on the countdown. Well, these are my rankings, so if you disagree, you can come up with your own. Kind of like how the Protestant Church comes out with a new denomination every time they disagree on a single Bible verse. Anyway, Pitts Films, or PITS Films, however they pronounced it, was the distribution arm of Bud Yorkin and Norman Lear's Tandem Productions, founded for the distribution of shows such as Good Times, Sanford and Son, and Maude. You may notice that their most popular medium, All in the Family, is nowhere to be found in that list. That's because that show was under a different arm. Those of you tuning in to reruns of All in the Family back in the day would have been treated to this.
Whoa, 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 there it is, there it is. Whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah, I know, there really wasn't any reason to do that whole biography thing. I just really wanted to use that video clip again. Alright, enough fooling around. Let's discuss this logo, shall we, in the horrible mono audio that the built-in microphone on this camera provides. I really need to get a stereo microphone someday in the future. This stuff sounds horrible. From a basic standpoint, this logo really isn't that bad. It's just your average, run-of-the-mill, low-budget distribution tag that served its purpose in the late 1970s through the 1980s and has since been plastered into extinction by subsequent copyright holders. However, if that was just the case, it would not be here. For our first logo in the countdown, we're going to spend a little more time on it than others. You want to know why? Because this logo right here is the perfect vessel to describe what makes a logo uncanny. Why is it here? Why do I find this logo unsettling? Well, let's talk about it, shall we? We're going to divide this into 4 different pieces. The first and final points will be the biggest offenders. The little minor things we'll describe in the middle, the second and third things. Kind of like a hamburger, you know? You got the buns and then the rest of it in between. So the first and biggest offender we're going to talk about here is the logo's animation, the way it's executed. once again, from a basic standpoint, there's nothing wrong with it. The logo's animation's really simple. You have poorly animated stars pop out of the vanishing point, fling out, and then retract in between the letters that serve as the abbreviation dots. But what makes the animation uncanny is the execution, the way the animation is executed, the timing, so to say. First and foremost, the way the logo makes its first appearance. You have the end credits of the show. They finish a Bud Yorkin, Norman Lear tandem production, whatever. Fades to black, that's it. Then suddenly out of nowhere, bam! This thing just flings in out of nowhere. It just cuts in right away. It's honestly kind of jarring, to be completely honest. It's kind of like a silent jump scare. You know how you have jump scares, right? You know how something jumps out at the screen for the mere purpose of scaring you? That's what this thing does to a lesser extent. It's not out to get you, but the way it just cuts in out of nowhere after the credits fade to black, it just kind of catches you off guard. It's jarring. And then right away, the logo animation just immediately starts up. You know, it just suddenly starts flinging stars at you out of nowhere. Just right away, instantly butts its way in as soon as the credits fade out, and then immediately starts flinging stars at you. It doesn't give you much time to process the fact that, hey, the show's over and now we have the production company logo. It just immediately butts its way in and immediately begins its animation. And yeah, it just makes you feel uncomfortable. I guess that's what I could say. It could lead to some minor discomfort. And then last but not least, the way the logo exits the television screen. Unlike its infamous cousin, which stays on screen for a couple of seconds after the animation finishes, it just immediately fades out. Just like that, it's over. It fades out immediately, so it butts its way in, it flings its animation at you, and before you even get a chance to look at the finished product, it just disappears like nothing happened. I mean, yeah, the company's name is on screen the entire time, so you have plenty of time to read it. That is, if you're not distracted by the animation. But instead of letting you look at the finished product, it just closes out immediately. The animation doesn't even finish before it fades to black, and that just gives myself an uneasy feeling. Nothing less, nothing more on that one. Let's get into the minor little details. One of the minor details, the way the company's name is presented, the word mark. It's loud, it's proud, it's screaming its name at you. Now, in 1979, when the logo made its debut, that was pretty much the rage in graphic design. Pretty much every logo on television had loud, garish ways they were presented. Abstract fonts everywhere, avant-garde word marks. You had it all. In 2025 or 2026, depending on how long it takes to produce this, because I got many other things on the docket, it comes off as crude. It comes off as unwelcoming. It's screaming its name at you. And like I said, in 1979, there really wasn't any issue with that because, hey, that was the norm at the time. But in 2025, when oversimplification and minimalism is key, it comes off as unwelcoming. And it's a really funky font, too. You have this wireframe font where it plays a sort of optical illusion. At one angle, it looks like the text is pointing out to the left. In another frame, it looks like it's aiming out to the right. In some cases, if you look at it close enough, if you do a staring contest with it, it looks like it's popping out in both directions. It's a cool font. It's a neat way to present the company's name. But like I said, in the modern era where everyone's used to basic minimalistic fonts, it just comes out as unwelcoming. You know what else is unwelcoming? The color scheme. These two colors do not go well together. You've got a navy blue background, and then the word mark is in a bright lime green color. They're complete polar opposites of each other. One color's way too dark, while the other color's way too bright. And yeah, it might look cool, it might look futuristic, but from a basic artistic standpoint, it's kind of an ugly combination. It's pretty darn gaudy. Someone in the boardroom, when they came up with this logo, told the executives, "Oh yeah, dark blue and bright green. These are the perfect color palette to describe our brand. Everybody's going to remember Pitts films when they remember dark blue and bright green." Yeah, I'm probably not going to be allowed in Seattle after that joke, but I just had to get that out there. This isn't the first time we've seen this ugly color combination either. Go back to earlier in the decade in North Carolina's PBS station, UNC-TV, had a very similar color palette. You see it right here. It's bright green, and then I'm going to assume that's purple. But the difference there is that you've got a dark background behind it, which helps the colors pop out. Helps complement it pretty well. Here the colors are just right in your face, blasting at you. It just, once again, it feels unwelcoming. It's an ugly color design, and I would have honestly done something different here. I would have made it like, I would have had a blank background and then the distributed by in films text. I would have made that like a blue color or something. But nonetheless, last but not least, when we talk about the logo itself, let's talk about the logo's audio. It already assaults your eyes. It already assaults you that way, but the audio department, it's kind of a combination of all three. The animation and its timing, as well as the word marks, font, and the color scheme. I am not doing this with a script, basic rehearsal. This is my best take yet. One where the cats haven't completely gone in. They must have heard about saving Kitty. Anyway, the logo's audio is pretty standard for the time. You have a loud, jaded-sounding synth piece. You have a synth arpeggio that plays as the stars pop out and retract, and then a final flourish as the animation concludes. But once again, just like the word mark, it's not really welcoming in 2025. Back then, every logo had a synth theme. Everything was synthesizer. That was all the rage. Every production company had a Moog synthesizer, and they were screwing around with it and coming up with whatever they could come up with, so to say. And this is just another average example. However, in the modern day of 2025, it just comes off as crude sounding. The best way I can describe this, it reminds myself of a fire alarm. I'm sure you guys all know what fire alarms sound like. They're loud, they're brash, they're shrill. Their main purpose is to scream at you, "Hey, this building's on fire, you need to get out of here, you're gonna die." That's not exactly what I'm going for when I'm talking about the logo's audio. But yeah, it's pretty shrill, just like that. It feels concerning. And what doesn't help is how low budget it sounds like. They probably use some real cheap synthesizer pieces because, hey, this is just a distribution logo. This is only going to appear on reruns. It's not like we're going to put this on first run like they do with Embassy Television a few years down the road. I can understand that, but, you know, the cheap audio, it just rubs myself the wrong way, so to say. So yeah, you combine all of that together, the logo's animation, the way it's timed, the avant-garde font, the gaudy color scheme, and that loud, shrill synth fanfare, and you've got yourself an Uncanny logo. Now, once again, there's really nothing that bad with this logo. It's not the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. It'd be a number one if that was the case. But I felt that the first logo on our countdown would be the perfect vessel to dissect and analyze what makes a logo uncanny. And with that said and done, you have Pitts Films. And I mean, yeah, to be honest, if the logo were to accidentally air on television, it'd catch myself off guard, especially if you're not expecting it, you know? The way it just jumps out at you. It's kind of jarring, so to say. Anyway, we have about 16 more logos on this countdown. I don't want to spend the entire time talking about this one. So let's move on. What's up next? So, when I was a little kid, I was born in the late 1990s, and I grew up in the 2000s. I'm a 2000s kid. Like everyone else my age, one of the shows I grew up with in early childhood was Barney the Dinosaur. And yeah, it was a pretty fun show. You know, I don't think it deserves all the hate it gets. You know, people overthink it. Of course, when we were 10 years old, we would always talk about, oh, we're too old, that stuff's for babies, so therefore it sucks. But yeah, it's a pretty decent show. Not something I'm going to go back and watch because I'm 27 years old. But you get the idea. If I were to go back and watch a preschool age show today, I think the best rewatch factor on any of the shows would be VeggieTales. And this isn't the last time you're going to hear VeggieTales in this description here. So in the very early days of Barney the Dinosaur, when it was known as the Backyard Gang, you had this logo right here, the Lions Group. Lions Partnership was the name of the copyright holders throughout the entire series' run, but during the early days, they actually had an on-screen logo. They were known as the Lions Group. Now, just like the last logo, from a basic standpoint, you're probably thinking to yourself, what is this doing on here? There's nothing uncanny or unnerving about this. This is the complete opposite. Yeah, I agree with you. It's a very happy logo. It's very happy. It's very upbeat. And that's why it's uncanny. It's just a little too happy for my liking. You know, there is a level. You know, you can be happy, you can be upbeat. That's the thing. We're trying to be happy and upbeat here. But if you're a little too happy, I just banged the top of the car where I'm shooting this. Then it just comes off as feeling off. And that's what this logo feels like. It feels off. It feels like something's going to jump out at you. There is one thing I can compare this to if you still don't know what I mean. I'm going to play it for you right here. Yeah, that right there, the ghost car commercial, one of the very first viral videos on YouTube. I can't believe there are people these days that are parents that were born after YouTube became a thing. I'm old. I'm also old enough to remember when Yahoo was the biggest search engine. You also had Lycos. I never used that one, but Lycos kind of sound like lions. So, yeah, that's what you have right there. This logo is just way too happy-go-lucky, and it just feels like it's off. Like everything's about to go wrong. You know, when I was little, I had a VHS tape with this logo on it. And this would appear at the end, and every time I saw it, I'd get nightmares. Like, the following time I'd nap or go to sleep, I'd have nightmares where the logo would show up, and then as soon as it was done, something I was terrified, usually Larry the Cucumber from VeggieTales, because for some weird reason, he was my nightmare fuel, would jump out and scare the ever-living daylights out of myself. Well, if there was any daylight, it was usually nighttime when I was asleep, as opposed to the modern day where I'm awake from like 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. unless I have to work. But yeah, that's the best way I can describe it, you know? It's just off. It feels like something's going to jump out at you. And what doesn't help matters is that the original Barney the Dinosaur, I went back and looked at it. It's kind of freaky. You know, I'm used to the regular costume, you know, the purple costume, the green torso, all that. The old Barney was just, he's kind of freaky looking, and I guess my brain associates the original Barney design with the logo that appeared at the end, because by the time they redid it, by the time it was a PBS show that they were producing with Connecticut Public Television, Barney was rebranded and this logo was retired. But yeah, simply putting it forth, the logo's way too happy. It feels like something's off. It feels like something's about to jump out at you. And Barney the dinosaur himself was pretty freaky in the early years. And there you have it. That's the combination you have that makes this logo uncanny. Alright, you guys got a basic idea of what we're looking out for. Let's move on to some more. We're in the 15 to 10 range. This is where things start to become a little more unsettling. These two were just basically simple descriptions, kind of practice if you know what I mean. Let's move on to a little more of an uncomfortable set of logos, shall we? So for long-time viewers of this channel, that is if there are any besides Speggy Man, he's the only one I can really think of, that logo might have sounded familiar, and that's because it is. Okay, that's enough with the flashbacks or whatever. We're only going to do that if we absolutely have to. Let's talk about this logo, shall we? So first and foremost, once again, what is this doing here? Why aren't we talking about the more well-known closing logo? That's the scary one, or uncanny. I just broke my own rule. Well, once again, my brain sees things differently, and therefore I find this one more freaky than the closing logo. But don't get myself wrong, I have some history with the regular closing logo itself. So in my early childhood on Cartoon Network, you had this show called the Powerpuff Girls. Not to be confused with the 2016 reboot that I'm not going to go into any detail on. Why did I stutter? Because if I were to rant about it, I'd get all political, and nobody wants politics. We're all tired of politics. So we're simply going to talk about the logo. So yeah, this logo was brought back for one last run on the Powerpuff Girls, and it did a pretty good job of scaring myself back then. So by that logic, you'd be asking yourself, why are you more freaked out by this one than the regular closing logo? Well, it kind of boils down to a couple of different points that I'll bring up. It's kind of hard to really come up with something other than I'm just freaked out by it. And that's going to be the case for quite a few logos until we get down to maybe the top 4. It's going to be hard to describe, but I'll try to do what I can. So, I think what makes this logo here more freaky than the closing logo is just how unexpected it is. You expect to see this logo at the end of shows, but instead, it's just popping up right at the start. And if you don't expect it, it can give you kind of a scare. That's really all I can think of there. And also, just the weird loud harp or whatever it is. I'm just kind of creeped out by the audio this logo uses. Another reason why I put this one on here instead of the closing logo itself is because of the way it just joins in progress. You really don't have time to prepare for it, because on the regular full closing logo, you have the star slowly swirl in. Here it's joining in progress, and, you know, you don't have that preparation time. And it just kind of gets to you. Now, there is an alternate version of this logo that they used on reruns of the Jefferson... not the Jeffersons, the Jetsons in the 1980s. And it had a much different piece of music. I'll play it for you right now. So unlike the actual main logo we're talking about here, the simple bells just kind of take away the fear factor. It kind of sounds like something you'd hear in a department store when someone picks up the intercom. But what mainly puts this logo on the list is just that loud ding at the start. It's just kind of unsettling. And then finally, the logo design's kind of freaky as well. Want to know why? This is one of the biggest cliches out there. This is brought up in pretty much every single one of these rankings. It's a black background. Just you have this bright, colorful, whimsical object on a plain blank background, and there's just something sinister about it. In no way, shape, or form were they attempting to make it unnerving, but it just is where you have this object against a pitch black background. Now, to be fair, you have every color under the sun represented here, so it's kind of hard to do anything other than a blank background. But that's just the other thing, it just seems off with this bright, colorful object being against a blank background. That's pretty much all I have to say about this one. I do apologize for the stumbling and bumbling our way through this one, but I couldn't really come up with any real explanation other than digging deep like I did. Thankfully, the next logo on our countdown, we can definitely have things to say about. There's plenty to talk about with this next logo. Let's move into it, shall we? It's another production company that mainly focused on cartoons. Oh yeah, you knew this one was coming. We are absolutely, positively, 100% talking about this logo right here, and it really doesn't need any introduction. You want to know why this thing is uncanny? Just look at it. Is that not the scariest thing you've ever seen? Does that not make you want to wet your pants or cry to mommy? That is without a shadow of a doubt the scariest thing I've ever seen, and the fact that this isn't number one is baffling. And it's not the logo we're going to be talking about. Let's talk about this one, shall we? In yet another installment of What Is This Doing Here? Why are you talking about this one? I mean, seriously, everyone's scared of the one we just tried to talk about right there. The old bait and switch. You guys thought we were going to talk about that one. Instead, we're talking about this one. Everyone's terrified of Splat. Everyone's terrified of him. He's the scariest thing everybody's ever seen. Well, I beg to differ. I was always freaked out by this one. Come on, just because I came up with the whole Klasky Chapeau Nightmares thing doesn't mean that it's the logo we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about this one right here. Well, let's get into it. Enough introduction. Remember when we were talking about Pitt's films and the execution? That's key when we talk about this logo. First and foremost, it just jumps right out at you. You do not get any break room between the logo's appearance and the end of the credits. It just jumps right out at there. And not only that, but remember how Pitt's films, we talked about how the animation was simple. The stars came out of the background, popped up, and then settled between the letters. Well, take that and multiply it by about 257, and you have the result right here. There is just so much going on and so little time, if any, to figure out what's going on. First and foremost, we talk about the Klasky K-L-A-S-K-Y. I had to count. You got 6 letters, and they scroll across the screen, and each letter has its own animation, and that's fine, but it just quickly forms. Like, you have a split second, and you can't even see what the animation is because it just goes by so fast. You have no time to figure out what's going on before, bam, the logo's formed and it's scrolled over to show this one. Unless you slow down the logo and play it frame by frame, you have no idea what's going on, and it's pretty darn confusing the first time you see it. Not only that, but you don't just have the animation in the foreground, the background has a bunch of different shapes and designs that pop in and out every split second. You have no time to figure out what the shape in the background is either. So you're trying to figure out what's going on. You're trying to figure out how the first letter is forming, how the letter is forming, and at the same time, you need to figure out what's going on in the background, what shapes are popping up there. And it just scrolls by so fast, you have no time to get any semblance of what's happening. And then you kind of get a sort of break when the chapeau writes in. You know, it's just simply scribbling in. But you don't really get that much of a break either because you still have everything dancing around in the background. And then finally at the very end, it just immediately zooms out. Once again, you don't have any time to prepare, and bam, here's the finished product. And even though you still have multiple things going on. You still have everything dancing around the background. You still can't figure out what's going on there. And then to top it all off, the logo the contrast goes down. And it's kind of gross. You know, whenever I see the logo's colors decomposing that way, I think of those uploads on YouTube, you know, the time lapse of food decomposing. It's gross. It's disgusting. That's what I'm reminded of. I don't want to be reminded of rotting food while I'm watching your production logo. Why does it need to fade like that? And then, of course, you have the logo's music, the logo's audio. It's the same thing as the animation. Multiple layers of animation dancing around in your face, not giving you any time to figure out what's going on, but in audio form. You have this loud, scratchy synth piece with all the sound effects jumbled in, but we're going to talk about the main track. It sounds angry. It sounds like whoever composed it is mad at you, and they're gonna come for you. Like they're after you, and this is their warning. We're coming for you because you did something that upset us. It just sounds angry. And when I was very little, angry people terrified myself. I could not watch Family Feud because I was terrified of Louis Anderson because he always sounded angry. Let's play the feud. He just sounded angry. And it took till I was an older child, possibly even adult, to get over that fear. Another thing I was terrified when I was little was the Aflac duck, because he would always get mad. And then I refused to watch certain episodes of VeggieTales. I was already terrified of that the way it was, but whenever the characters would get angry, that was especially terrifying. The audio here just sounds angry. That's all there is to it. And the fact that they throw in different sound effects, the sound effects just come and go so quickly, you combine all of that together, and it leaves you confused and unsettled. It just jumps in, and then it immediately fades out like nothing happened. Not only that, but a couple of lesser points. I always found the character designs for Klasky Chapeau's characters to be really freaky looking. Like they had their own unique art style, but they were just like the way the logo decomposes color-wise at the end. I always found the character designs gross and disgusting to the point where they freaked myself out. And then finally, another thing I was terrified of when I was little was the Nickelodeon logo would follow. You know that haystack shape, that hay pile? I don't know what it was, but that thing was just, I don't know if I was expecting the splat or something the first time I saw it, but for the longest time, that shape just really unsettled myself. I'm perfectly fine with it today, but as a young child, man, that thing was horrifying. And I can't explain it. I mean, usually it would have audio from the show, but more often than not, it would just be there in dead silence, like it's just silently judging you for the 3 seconds it's on screen before fading to black. And you would usually only see this on-demand copies, because they would keep the credits. Nickelodeon would always play their split screen where they show the ad for some show that's only going to last 2 seasons. But yeah, man, that thing was freaky. So yeah, you combine all of that together. The extremely scattershot animation. 7, 8 different things going on at once. The logo's just disgusting. Color degrade at the end. The angry sounding music and the menagerie. Plethora. I'm using my vocabulary words here. Sound effects, and then finally that Nickelodeon logo at the end, combined with the fact that I was freaked out by Klasky Chapeau's character designs. I mean, yeah, I watched Rugrats as a child, who didn't? And you get yourself an Uncanny logo. Now, don't get myself wrong, you know, it's a very unique piece of art. I'm not going to call it a logo, I'm going to call it art. It's a very unique piece. But it's just the way it's executed, how quickly everything scrolls by without giving you the chance to figure out what's going on, that warrants its place on this list. Let's move on, shall we?
Oh, and before we move on, I got one last thing for a certain Speggy man. Klasky Chapeau, 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 Chapeau. I'm not going to pronounce it the way you want it pronounced because this is how I pronounce it. Last but not least, that's a stray cat right there. His name's Funny Face. You can see why. Alright, on to the next logo.
So earlier on, when we were talking about the Hanna-Barbera logo, I brought up that there might be a few on this list that I could barely come up with anything other than I find it uncanny. Well, this and the logo that's going to follow fall into that category. I thought long and hard about this logo, and for the longest time, you know, the only thing I could come up with was, this logo's unsettling. I don't know why it is. I mean, you look at it, it's a very happy, very upbeat logo. I mean, it's not as overly happy to the point of terrifying you as the Lions Group logo is, but it's a pretty positive and upbeat logo. There's really no reason for it to be here. I've got to stop saying that. I'm saying that before we talk about any logo on here. But after thinking long and hard about this thing, I finally came up with 2 different reasons why I'm freaked out by it. The first thing we're going to talk about, it's the logo's animation. It's just way too cheap. It's shoestring budget animation, and ever since I was a young child, I've always been freaked out by real low budget animation. Back in, I'd like to say 2010 or 2011, they used to run this commercial for knee braces, and it featured some of the poorest animation you've ever done see, and I'm going to play it for you right now. Fragments of it, just showing the animation.
Grandma, can you come out and play?
Sure, Ellie. Oh my, you might want to come here and help Grandma.
What's the matter, Grandma? Can't you stand?
Oh, sorry, honey. It's my knees. They don't work the way they used to.
Yeah, that commercial, every time it came on television, it did the best job in the world of scaring the crap out of myself. And that's what I'm reminded of when I watch this logo right here. It's that poorly animated. You know, if I knew how to animate in Blender, I could probably go in and recreate this thing, and it'd still look better than the original source. Heck, I could probably go into Microsoft Paint, because that's where my artistic ability is limited to.
and probably recreate this thing frame by frame, and you would still think that the remake would look better. That's how bad it was. Now, for those not in the know, this wasn't the only label the owner of this company had. He had another logo. Yeah, you see that right there, Family Home Entertainment, one of my all-time favorite logos. In fact, it was the inspiration behind my most favorite Teacup Productions logo of all time. Alright, I'm kind of going on a nostalgia trip here. Let's get back to the main subject. But if you compare this logo with Family Home Entertainment, like, yeah, Family Home Entertainment still looks bad. You could tell they were on a budget when they made it. But the difference is that it at least looks presentable. It at least has a sort of charm to it. And this logo does also. But if we're talking about my biases, the animation on this one looks far worse. It just looks really bad. And it's just off-putting. It gets under my skin. I'm kind of rambling. I could probably describe this logo in 5 seconds. You would get the answer. I need to stop stuttering like Keswick on Tough Puppy. Anyway, the only other thing I can think of when it comes to this logo is the music. Like the actual logo itself, it's very happy and joyous. It's a nice poppy little composition. But what rubs myself the wrong way is that weird synth whirring in the background, the at the end. That has always sent shivers down my spine for no good reason. I really can't explain why, but this logo just gets to myself. I can't describe it. I'm kind of rambling here. This and the next logo are just going to be rambling. I guess the only other thing I can think of is the colors of the IVE. They're pretty darn faded. Remember how I talked about the Klasky Chapeau logo losing its contrast in the previous segment? That's what it looks like here. It just, once again, it's gross and disgusting. I'm reminded of decomposed food. And I don't like being reminded of that. It just, ultimately, the logo, it's low budget and gross. That's really all I can come up with. It's a far cry from what Family Home Entertainment was. And I'll be honest, Family Home Entertainment was kind of gross too. I mean, the background looked like a slice of processed cheese. But at least that logo has a nostalgia charm to it. This one, on the other hand, it's just really low budget. And it's off-putting. And this isn't going to be the last time you're going to hear about low budget. Once we get to like number 6, I think. Number 6 or number 7 on the countdown. We haven't gotten there yet. We're still in the early stages of this production. This will be brought up yet again. And you guys will get to see another commercial I was terrified of when I was little. Alright, let's get this other logo out of the way. For the first time on this countdown, we're featuring a logo that doesn't originate here in the United States. Please watch. So initially coming into this one, my overall thoughts were, yeah, this is going to be another logo I'm going to have a hard time describing. It's going to be like Hanna-Barbera and International Video Entertainment, where my only conclusion is that I'm unsettled by the logo and that I'll have to ad-lib through it to give some padded out time on the segment. But thankfully, after going back and re-watching this logo for the first time in quite a few years, I finally have an actual description to give you guys. Unfortunately, it's going to be rather short compared to the other logos we've described on this countdown. Just look at the logo for yourself and you pretty much have your conclusion. It's dark. The animation's dark, the logo design is dark, and the music itself is especially dark. That's all there is to it. To describe the logo in a way the CLG Wiki used to do back in the early days when they had scare factors, it's dark mooded. Nothing less, nothing more. I can't come up with anything else. It pretty much speaks for itself. You know, it's the whole package in one. But to pad this segment out, that way it's not done in 45 seconds, I'm going to give you guys a scenario. I want you guys to imagine that you're somewhere between the age of 4 and 7 years old. In some cases, you can say 8, 9, or even 10 years old, because I was still pretty scared of logos at the age of 10, possibly up to, I want to say, 12 or 13 was the last time I really found myself incredibly freaked out by logos. Imagine you're a young child. It's late at night, it's dark outside, your mother told you you could watch one more show before you went to bed. She's already in bed, your parents are already in bed, fast asleep, you're in the house on your own, it's completely dark in the house as well, the only thing that's on is the television. Okay? Picture that. You're just about to turn the television off, the last show you are watching is ending, and the very last thing you see and hear before you turn that television off is this. If I was in the shoes of that little boy or little girl, I can guarantee you right now that I would have a hard time going to sleep that night, let alone leaving the living room and going into my bedroom, because the only thing that would be playing in my head nonstop over and over again would be this logo right here. So anyway, I'm finishing it out. All I can really say is that I am glad that I did not discover this logo until I was well into adulthood. It was like 2017 or 2018 when I saw this logo for the first time. Had I had been exposed to this logo as a young child, this would definitely be in the top 7 instead of right here in the initial stages. And another thing, I sure am glad I did not grow up in Australia, because I would have been exposed to this logo at least once as a child, and we would be in the situation I gave you right there. Let's talk about another logo that was intending to be frightening, shall we? Let's move on. So for the longest time, I was debating whether I wanted to put this one on the countdown or the one that appeared on the final episode of St. Elsewhere. Ultimately, I chose this one because, unlike the other one, this one was able to weasel its way into my nightmares the first time I saw it, all the way back in 2007 or 2008, when I was either 9 or 10 years old. Yeah, that's the main reason right there. Don't get myself wrong, the one that appeared on the final episode of St. Elsewhere does have its own qualities that could put it on this list. It is a bad logo, but the way I see it, that one's mainly more upsetting than it is uncanny. Yeah, sure, it might spook you the first couple of times you see it, but that one's just more uncomfortable and not in the uncanny way we're trying to describe there. So what makes this what most people would consider to be an in-credit mention rather than an actual production logo worthy of being on this countdown? I already said I'd stop with that. You might not know why this is on the list. I really need to stop doing that. This is my list. These are my opinions. I need to stop doing that. Okay, enough rambling. Let's talk about this. What makes this logo uncanny is one thing. It's an anomaly. It is the polar opposite of what you expect when you see the name MTM Enterprises and you think of production logos. The actual MTM Enterprises logo itself is one of the most well-known vanity plates in the history of television. The thing ran through the 1970s, it ran through the 1980s, heck, it made its way all the way up to 1998, the year after I was born, when the company was acquired and dissolved by News Corporation. It's a very well-known logo. It's one of the best parodies out there. It comes out there and it makes fun of one of the biggest players in Hollywood history. When you think of the logo, you think of that adorable, memorable, nostalgic logo that appears at the end of some of the most well-known sitcoms of the 1970s and 1980s. It's one last laugh and one last comforting moment before you finish an episode of the Bob Newhart Show, the Mary Tyler Moore Show, WKRP in Cincinnati, etc. But what happens when you take such a well-beloved and welcoming logo and turn it completely upside down and try to come up with the polar opposite? Well, you get this. The main reason why I was freaked out by this thing so much the first time I saw it was for the simple reason that Mimsy, the name of the cat in the logo, is nowhere to be seen. She is nowhere. Instead, you just have the text. And there's just something threatening about it. You know, it's kind of like if you were to go to a hockey game or a baseball game, something like that, and the mascot wasn't at the gates to greet you when you came in. In a way, Mimsy was MTM's mascot. And finishing any show without the mascot, yeah, that just feels really off-putting. It really makes my skin crawl. It doesn't feel right to have the logo without the cat. And not only that, but the way the logo's text is presented. You know, if you look at the regular logo, it's usually in bright, vibrant, fun colors. Save for the final incarnation of the logo when the company was under the control of International Family Entertainment. I think that's the name of the company. When the text was all orange. But for most of the logo's lifespan, the text was in bright, colorful, warm colors. Here, once again, it's the complete opposite. The logo is all in one color, and it's a dark red crimson color that's supposed to look like blood. And for a lot of people, the sight of blood is going to trigger a fight or flight response. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen with this logo, but I hope you know what I mean. Just seeing the fun, playful, warm, colorful text that accompanies Mimsy in such a hostile color is really uncomfortable and unsettling. What doesn't help matters either is the music that plays underneath. It is way too somber for my liking. So not only do you have this anomaly of what was once a beloved production logo playing out before your eyes, but you also have that overly depressing piece of music trailing out in the background, and that just leaves you with way too many mixed emotions. You feel frightened, unsettled, uncomfortable, those are the same words, kind of curious, and you also feel depressed because of the music in the background. It's the complete opposite of what you had with the regular MTM Enterprises logo. Not very happy in my opinion. So yeah, you combine all of that together and it gets its ranking on this countdown. Of course, like I said before I introduced this logo, I'm pretty darn sure this was done on purpose. The logo was made to mimic the same style as the credits, because if you look at the end credits to the one thing that's appeared on a TV movie called Vampire, which was of course a horror film, then, yeah, it completely makes sense, you know? MTM Enterprises usually produced happy programming, and I'm mainly thinking of the sitcoms. I'm not really thinking of things like St. Elsewhere, because you know how I feel about that show. But, yeah, you get the idea right there. It's the complete polar opposite. They knew what they were doing here, and I've got to give credit to all the people at MTM for taking their very memorable and welcoming logo and turning it into something threatening and hostile. So kudos to you guys. Thanks for giving myself one of my most memorable and confusing nightmares ever. If you guys want to hear about it, I'll tell it to you right now. So the one nightmare I gained from this logo, I was in my house and I went into my grandparents' bedroom for some reason, and the lights were off, but there was still light coming in from the windows and the balcony door from the sun. I went in, I opened their closet, and instead of it being a closet, it was just a dark void with this inside. And that's where I woke up. And I woke up sweaty and terrified. It's amazing how a simple in-credit mention can do so much to myself, but keep in mind, I was kind of different, Most kids my age were into things like, let's say, skateboards and video games. I don't know what they were into at the time. Probably something like that. And here I was obsessing over logos and fire alarms. I didn't really follow what everybody else did. I cannot wait for this segment to be cropped out and re-uploaded onto the Not Like the Other Girls subreddit, but I'm trying to explain why I had so many nightmares involving logos. Heck, to this day I still get dreams involving logos. It's part of an ongoing series I like to call Weird Logo Dream. And just the weird thing about them is the dreams involving logos are the most easy to remember. I can't explain it. But anyway, getting back to it, yeah, you have your logo right here. This is probably going to be the only in-credit mention that appears on here. Most people wouldn't really consider this a logo since how it's an in-credit mention. But on the official Avid page, last I checked, this was put down as a variation of the MTM Enterprises logo. So I'm going to include it. That's really all there is to say about this in-credit mention or logo variation. I'm sure people are 50-50. Some people see it as a logo. Some people see it as an in-credit notice. I'm going to call it a logo for that reason. I think I've done enough rambling. Let's move on to number 10, shall we? Welcome to the top 10, everybody. We are finally getting deep into this countdown. The difference between these final 10 logos and the ones you just saw is that these logos right here aren't just unsettling or uncanny, but they kind of get under my skin to this very day, and we're starting out with a logo I have some pretty deep history with, the Warner Brothers television logo from 1994. Now, on all the logos we've talked about here, we've tried to look at everything, not just the visuals, but the logo design, the audio. For this one, it's mainly the music, because there's nothing harmful about the logo itself, as you see right here. It's just the shield with some clouds in the background. Some people might argue that the shield's a little too close to the screen, but I'm kind of just grasping at straws with that one. So for this description, I have a story to tell all of you. It's story time. Gather around, ladies and gentlemen. Sit crisscross applesauce by the fire. I've got a story to tell you. So this story takes place in, 2007, when I was about 9 years old. So Nick at Night was rerunning the old ABC sitcom Full House. This was a sitcom that ran on ABC from 87 to 95. And I instantly fell in love with this show to the point where next time we made a family trip to Walmart, I had to buy the season 1 box set. Gas big time, Daphne's tied up. I better make I Love Daphne episode 4. Uh-oh, on Windows Movie Maker. Oh no! Check out the Full House and Logo Buzz playlist on my channel if you need context for that. But yeah, so At this point, I was really only familiar with the early episodes, and at the end of the show, you had an announcer, Dave Coulier. I probably butchered that name, and I apologize. He played, I think his name was Uncle Joey. It was Joey something. It's been so long since I've seen this show that I've forgotten. But he would always announce, this show was produced by Jeff Franklin Productions and Miller Boyette Productions in association with Lorimar Television. Now, on the Season 1 box set I had, it showed the Lorimar Telepictures logo. I was kind of hoping to get the Line of Doom on there, but nope, it was Lorimar Telepictures. And I always found it funny that he said Lorimar Television because he had another name on there, but whatever. And it's distributed by Warner Brothers Domestic Television Distribution or something like that. And it would be silent. Well, fast forward about a month or so after getting into it, and Nick at Night is running a marathon of Full House episodes. A lot of them I had not seen before because I hadn't been beyond Season 5 at this point. We're talking about later episodes. And I remember crawling out of my bunk bed, up in what was at one time the family room. There was a bunk bed. I slept on the top bunk, and I had a television right there to watch that was hanging on the wall. It was one of those old heavy CRT televisions. And then my younger brother lay in the bottom bunk. I remember climbing down and asking my grandmother, can I watch this marathon? And she said, go for it. I mean, watch as much as you want. If you're tired and groggy and don't want to go to school because you're tired, that's your own fault because it was a school night. But, yeah, so I started watching the episodes, and at this point, it's about around 10:30 p.m. at night. So remember that scenario I gave you when we were talking about Southern Star's logo? It's kind of the situation right here. The show ends, and this was one of the final seasons where the Lorimar logo just said Lorimar Television and it was in credit. When they get to the Warner Brothers logo, surprise, it had this fanfare on it. And it was just so unexpected and so jarring that it absolutely ruined my night. At that point in time, it was the scariest thing I had ever heard. It was just loud, it was brash, it was bold, it was bombastic. It was sending a message, this is Warner Brothers, and we distributed this show. It was loud and absolutely terrifying. One of the scariest things I had ever heard. And at that point, I went running for my grandparents' room, and I told them that I had a nightmare or something, and I had to sleep in there with them because I felt unsafe being in that room. That's how threatening the music was. And of course, I left my younger brother there. I abandoned him there. I was such a jerk. But yeah, that's pretty much the reason, I had a really bad experience. It's kind of like when I was talking about the Nickelodeon hay pile. I had never heard this thing before, and it was just absolutely terrifying. You also have to take into account that it was what I would consider at that time to be late at night, because usually 9:30 p.m. was when I had to cut everything off and go to bed. But because there was a marathon on, I was allowed to stay up late. But this was considered new territory. Territory I only reached if my friends were over and we were trying to stay up till midnight or New Year's Eve. I wasn't used to it. And it might have just been the fact that I heard this thing for the first time because it was late at night. Like I said with that Southern Star scenario, it was dark. Everybody was asleep. I was the only one awake. Dark outside, dark in the house. The television was the only thing on. It was just that horrifying to the point where I always avoided the end credits on, if it showed the end credit Lorimar Television logo, I would instantly shut the television off for 10 to 20 seconds. And even when I turned it on, I'd have my ears covered or plugged. I always plug my ears. Everybody covered them, but I plugged them, just in case it was still playing. Then there was another incident. This was a few years later. I was in, I want to say, 7th grade. This was in 2011. where I was all alone in my room, in my grandparents' room, watching Nick at Night. It was still on at this point. Family Matters was ending. I think Full House was coming on. I'd still tune in and watch that. Either that or I'd go on demand and watch Dexter's Laboratory reruns. That was my favorite Cartoon Network show ever, right next to Total Drama Island. Don't ask about my crush on Bridget Speggy, man. Frick, I've said too much. He's going to start something. What have I done? Anyway, we'll cross that bridge. That Bridget when we get there. Punbelievable, I know. Okay, enough rambling. Let's get on. So, Full House was about to come on. And by this point, I wasn't really freaked out by the logo. But it popped up at the end of the rerun, and it was unsettling. But then another Warner Brothers logo showed up with the same fanfare. So I had to hear it twice, and it was pretty darn unsettling. There is a YouTube upload, LARDLOGO's Family Matters Experience. I kind of exaggerated and said it came on 5 times and I wet my pants. That did not happen. It only came up twice and it was pretty unsettling. Mainly because it was about 6:30 in the morning. This was in like the fall or winter time. The winter, maybe early spring, where the sun doesn't come up till around 8 a.m. It doesn't peak over till like just after 7:30. So it was still dark outside. And there was only really one light on besides the television. It was kind of a dark room. So that was pretty unsettling too. Fast forward a couple of years, my mother had this phase where she would binge watch Friends, one of the worst shows ever made. Team Seinfeld. But this logo would appear at the end of reruns all the time, and the music would end for the credits, and this music on the Warner Brothers logo would play, and it would always be late at night. I'd be on the computer, the lights were all dark, except for the television and the computer screen, and this would play, and what didn't help is right behind, this was in the dining room, you'd have the kitchen, and then the laundry room, which is a long, deep, kind of hallway sort of situation, and it'd be pitch black, and I was unsettled because it always felt like something was gonna come running out of there to chop my head off or something. I don't know what it is. It's like the fanfare was announcing the arrival of your demise or something. I guess that's what I could come up with. In the present day of 2025 or 26, depending on when this releases, because it's taking a while to produce. This thing's over an hour long. I'm kind of shocked about that. I'm not so freaked out by it these days, but it's still uncomfortable to listen to. I think it just all stems from that one experience I had with the logo back when I was, like 9 years old. It was enough to completely turn myself off from the logo for an entire lifetime. That's pretty much the story right there. Hopefully from those stories you can get an idea of what we're going for. I was just freaked out by the music. It was really disarming. Let's move into number 9. We're finally in the single digits. This is going to be another Warner Brothers logo, but in a different division. Here we go.
Moving closer to the middle of the frame.
There is one main reason why this logo is on the countdown right here. However, I'm going to wait till the end of my criticisms about this logo before I tell you about it. The main reason is why it's on this countdown. So let's tear this logo apart, shall we? First off, the beginning part, you have all the images flashing up on the screen. I think I talked about that with Klasky Chapeau, just not having any real chance to figure out what's going on unless you pause it and play it frame by frame. Thankfully, the Avid page has it all written down, so you can just go there to find out instead of pausing it frame by frame. But then you have this countdown on the screen, and there's just something distressing about countdowns. I think it's kind of some childhood trauma from watching game shows, you know, the bonus rounds always had countdowns, and it was some pretty stressful television as a young child. You know, are they going to win the big prize? Especially Supermarket Sweep. That was my favorite show as a young child. You know, the bonus round. You got to run around the market. You got to go on this little scavenger hunt, and you got to do it in 1 minute. Otherwise, you don't win the $5,000. Just, whenever I think of countdowns, I think of all the stress I had watching game show bonus rounds as a young child. And once again, you know, the countdown, it feels like something's going to jump out at you as soon as the thing ends. And guess what? Something does jump out at you. The company's logo. Now, we were just talking about that MTM logo and how it was in that bloody color. Take that and multiply it by 246, and you get this right here. You get this very unorthodox WA in a bloody red color, and it looks like if you pick up a cat that's mad at you and it scratches the crap out of you, and you're just left with wounds all over. You know, when cats scratch you hard enough that it leaves multiple bloody cuts on you, that's what it looks like. It looks like an open wound. And not only that, but the background music. So for the first half of the logo, you have the song. But what does it even mean? Moving closer to the middle of the frame? What does that even mean? And then when the logo pops up, as soon as the countdown ends, it's kind of like a miniature jump scare, because bam, suddenly out of nowhere, you have this loud droning synth, which actually feels like that. Feel this? I'm banging against the camera. So I'll demonstrate for you. Moving closer to the middle of the frame. Like that. It startles you, and then you have those loud bells in the background, and this open wound looking logo just slowly zooming in at you. And you feel very uncomfortable, you feel very unsettled. You know, back before we knew the actual volume of 3G Home Video's logo, that's kind of what I'm reminded of here to a lesser extent. It's just uncomfortably loud with the synth drone and the bells. I got to admit, the way Home Video spins in does look kind of silly. It looks like one of your generic title screens on Sony Vegas or Windows Movie Maker. But that's only somewhat calming. You just have this loud synth drone, these loud bells, and then the bloody logo coming in at you. And that's pretty much it when we talk about this logo. Now, why is this on the countdown? What was that big reason I was telling you guys about? Warner Alliance Home Video was the Christian home video division of Warner Brothers. They put this at the start of religious programming, and it's the complete polar opposite. It's way too dark and way too moody to be a religious production logo. You know, when you think about Christianity and the story of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, it's a very happy and uplifting story, you know. Father God gave us His one and only Son, performed miracles in His time, was betrayed but went on to the cross and died for all of us. We accept Him into His life. We accept Him into our lives. We follow the 10 Commandments. We do good deeds. You're going to have a very good time after your time on this earth is complete. And yeah, you have the threat of the lake of fire. It doesn't say hell in the Bible. It says lake of fire. That's where the bad people go. But, you know, Christianity altogether has a very positive and uplifting message. It's why we call it the good news, because it is. Fun fact, gospel means good news, by the way. But just having this appear before some Christian music video or something. It does not work out at all. Just way too dark mooded to be a logo for a religious division. And yeah, I know Hollywood's secular, but come on. So yeah, that's Warner Alliance home video. I'm not really that freaked out by it, but it fit in here well because, man, that thing is dark. If we're trying to talk about religious logos, you do not need, like the first half of the logo, like I said, with the images flashing. I don't know why I'm stuttering again. It's fine, but it's mainly the second half of the logo where you have those loud bells and synth drones as this open wound looking logo eases in at you on a completely dark background. It's not very comfortable. Could you imagine, like, if some church plugged in one of their VHSs and this is what they showed? Yeah, it's cool. It's avant-garde. It fits its time period because this was the 1990s, but trying to experiment around before a Christian music video, it doesn't really fly with myself, and that's why it's here. Alright, I think we're done talking about Warner Brothers. I don't think there are any more in this countdown. Let's get back to ominous Southern Star-esque logos, shall we? Before we talk about this logo, I just want to tell you right now that noise in the background, the one that kind of sounds like this, I'm recording in the car, as you know, and for the first time in I don't know how long, it's actually raining, actual honest-to-goodness rain, and as usual, when it's dry for a long period of time up here in Washington, it comes back with a vengeance. So yeah, that's what you're hearing in the background. Anyway, let's get into the logo right here. Describing this logo right here is pretty darn easy because all I really have to do is take what I said about Southern Star a few segments back, copy and paste it, and you have my thoughts. This, in my opinion, is just the American version of Southern Star. But obviously that would be a cop-out and I need to give an explanation for every logo on this countdown. And besides, even if the two logos are similar, this one's about, I think, 4 spots up from Southern Star. I think Southern Star was, I think it was number 12 on my countdown, and I believe we're at number 8 right now. It's been a while since I've done any work on this special. I've been mainly focusing on, rail fanning with my grandfather lately. Alright, in fact, this is the only segment I've been able to complete this entire week, I believe. Alright, enough jibber-jabber, gobbledygook, whatever. Let's get into talking about the logo. So what makes this one so much worse than Southern Star? They're both pretty much the same thing from my viewpoint. But with Southern Star, even with my critiques about it, at least it had a sort of mystical, futuristic feeling to it. This one, on the other hand, is just flat out cold, like it was intentionally trying to be different. And that's why I have it here on the countdown so high. The main thing I can use to describe this, a while back on one of the comments on the Sneeush logo, someone mentioned the game over screens on Donkey Kong Country, and that's what I think of right here. So if you've never played that game, I've never played it, but I looked up the game over screen, you kind of get my idea when talking about this one. I'll play it for you right now, right here. So as you can see from that, the video game itself takes place in this very vibrant, colorful, playful, warm world. And then when you lose, you're instantly, jarringly transported to this polar opposite game over screen, Instead of being welcoming and fun, you just have this really dark mooded screen, and it's just the sudden shift that makes it real unsettling. And that's the feeling I get here, because this company, this was a distribution company, sorry for the stuttering. Their main output was My Two Dads, which was a sitcom. So you go from the sitcom this appeared at the end of, which, sitcoms are funny, they're upbeat, they're happy, they're bright. And then you get this, it's the polar opposite. It's just dark, cold, and distant. It doesn't feel very welcoming, especially after watching sitcoms. Just the main thing that I'm unsettled by when it comes to this logo is the ending. After the logo forms, the animation's really nothing special to talk about, but you just have the logo staying on screen for a rather long time as that ghastly sci-fi noise or whatever. Yeah, it sounds cool, but at the same time, you combine that sci-fi sound with this logo staring at you against a pitch black background, and it stays on screen for a few seconds, and it just leaves you feeling uneasy. That's the main reason right there. It just, you have the sudden transition. Just a few seconds ago, you were at the closing credits of the sitcom where you're kind of debriefing and thinking to yourself, that was a pretty funny show. And then all of a sudden, bam, here's this giant logo against a pitch black background staring at you as this uncanny sci-fi sound echoes at you. It feels like you are a bad person and you've reached the afterlife, and you got the bad ending, and you're about to be tortured for eternity. That's kind of what I'm reminded of here. I mean, yeah, it kind of does feel like a game over screen. And then finally, to a lesser extent, the logo looks like something a credit card company would use. And I do not like paying credit card bills, so add that into the mix as well. And there you have it, that's Televentures. Let's talk about a logo that is no stranger to the LARDLOGO brand. This logo was lost media for years, considered the holy grail, and somehow I became one of the faces of the search for it. You already know which one we're going to talk about. Let's get into it right now. So before I really critique this logo, there is a lot of praise I need to shower upon it. Because this logo right here completely rejuvenated the LARDLOGO brand. Becoming one of the faces of the search for this thing, all because I saw this logo once as a young child and remembered it enough to give people a description. There's a lot I owe to this logo right here. This logo right here is probably what I'm best known for at this point besides Viacom. So yeah, I've got to give it to this logo. Thank you for completely giving new fortunes to the LARDLOGO name in this channel. And trying to find this logo, while it was frustrating, it was kind of fun and a lot of memories were given from this. So yeah, this one's pretty high up on the countdown for the mere purpose that I have history with this logo. I saw this logo once as a young child, and obviously, even though I have a pretty good idea of what it looked and sounded like, I still have a hard time remembering where I saw it. It was either at the end of a Facts of Life rerun, or it was at the end of a VHS tape that I probably recorded over with, because that's what I did back then. Regardless, you know, the way I remember this logo animating, obviously I remember it was a black background, the stars shot out from the bottom of the screen, filled the screen, either that or it rose up from the background and filled in, or it rose up and flashed, whatever it was. You're not going to remember memories picture perfect when you're little, but, yeah, obviously the animation's way different, and, honestly, you know, I want to believe that there is another logo, that they did two logos, because too many people remember the blue background, myself included. But at the same time, you know, it could possibly just be a Mandela effect, like all of the rising star deniers say it is. I'm not here to get into controversial topics, because this is a very polarizing logo. But I just wanted to get that stuff out of the way. So yeah, this logo right here is kind of a combination between Pitt's Films and then of course the logo we just talked about, Televentures. It kind of combines both of them right here. Once again, I'm going to bring up the Donkey Kong Country effect. We just talked about that video game's game over screen during the segment discussing Televentures. It's kind of the same thing right here. This logo was confirmed to appear at the end of two different shows. We know it appeared at the end of two different shows. One Day at a Time, where the partial capture came from, and then the Jeffersons, where the full logo was found. And then, of course, the logo, people that remember seeing the logo remember it appearing at the end of Mary Harton and Mary Hartman. And then a lot of people, myself, and then even someone we talked to who worked at the TAT Communications Company, remembers it appearing at the end of the Facts of Life. What do those four shows have in common? That's right, ladies and gentlemen, they were all sitcoms. I don't really know if Mary Harton and Mary Hartman was a sitcom, but I believe it was a soap opera parody, and parodies are usually done in a comical style. This logo was appearing at the end of sitcoms, and it just does not feel warm and welcoming. It's not the same as Embassy Television. You know, Embassy Television, which is the logo that replaced this one, has kind of a charm to it, you know? It has those warm colors, that memorable synth theme. It's a very welcoming logo, like it gives the vibe of, thanks for watching our show, we'll see you next time. This one's the polar opposite. It just feels very, very distant. And I'm going to bring up this term again, dark-mooded. You know, if you look at the credits to One Day at a Time and the Facts of Life, you know, those shows, you have the credits scrolling, and then in the background, you kind of have a highlight reel of the episode. And, you know, it's kind of time, like I talked about with Televentures. You're sitting there, if you choose to watch the credits, you're sitting there and you're reflecting on what you just watched. Oh, yeah, that was a pretty funny scene. Oh, yeah, I liked that part. Oh, this is a pretty good show. I wonder what will happen in the next episode. And then the credits come to an end, and bam, this thing just pops up right in front of you. Just instantly cuts in with that big orange screen. And then in the background, you have that horrible, horrible piece of music in name only, because it just sounds like whoever was on the synthesizer, it was rumored to be John Maxwell Anderson. Actually, it was him, because it has him in the credits on, I think, the ASCAP website. You know, I don't know if it's just the way it was put together. There's a lot of saw in the synth with this one, kind of gives it its sharp edge, no pun intended. But just the random assortment of keys, and then the kind of aggressive sounding synth, it makes it sound angry. It sounds upsetting. It's alarming. When I heard this music as a young child, of course, I remember it being a couple of octaves lower. it reminded myself of a fire alarm, you know? It just gives you kind of this feeling of danger, like something wrong is happening. That is the feeling that I got initially the one time I saw this logo as a young child. And then the orange screen doesn't even stay on for that long. It immediately transitions. Suddenly it's not a background anymore, but suddenly now it's a star, which kind of zooms back. It's kind of really just the first half of the animation that's unsettling, but that doesn't excuse the second half either, because you have the company's word mark, and we talked about this with Pitts Films, but it's in a giant abstract font, which for the time, because this logo, it came about in 1979. I want to say 1978 could have been the year it came out too, but I believe Pitts Films came out in 79. I'm just going to assume that both logos were animated and produced by the same team, because all of Norman Lear's companies, if I remember right, were based in the same office complex, so they probably all got put together at the same time. But, you know, in 1979, people were used to abstract fonts representing the company's name. In 2025, with everything being as minimalistic as ever, it comes off as crude. And there have been a couple of people I've seen that talk about how freaky the font looks. Like someone said that the A looked pretty scary, and someone else talked about how big the lettering is. And yeah, it's pretty large. It's kind of uncomfortable now that I think about it. Now, the one thing this logo does right that Pitts Films didn't is the way it's timed at the end. Just like Pitts Films, the way it starts, like it just pops out right at you. That's not exactly how it's supposed to go. You gotta have some kind of build-up before the logo starts. But the second half, you know, with the Pitts Films logo, that one fades out as the animation's finishing. This one stays on screen for a few seconds after it forms, and even after the star does that last little flash at the end, it kind of stays on the screen for a split second, and then the fade out, instead of being abrupt like Pitts Films, it's a little more gentle the way it fades out. It's kind of like a, oh, I'm sorry I startled you there, sort of thing. The last thing I can really think about, it's just the logo. Once again, this is another cliche, but it takes place on a pitch black background, and pitch black blank environments, like void environments, combined with that aggressive sounding synth theme, really rubs myself the wrong way. Now, once again, the animation looks completely different from how I remember it, and I'm thankful for it being a lot less frightening than how I remember it, but the thing that really puts it up here is just that piece of music they use. It just sounds so bad that it leaves you feeling uncomfortable. And I feel uncomfortable when I listen to this thing. Like I said, when I was a little kid, this thing reminded myself of a fire alarm. I think we all know how fire alarms sound. I talked about this with Pitts Films, you know? Just that loud, shrill, deet, deet, deet. We had to do fire drills in elementary school. When I was in elementary school, they'd set off the fire alarms. When I got to junior high and high school, they all took place on the same campus. They just used an audio recording of the fire alarm. That was a lot less frightening, but yeah, you know, it's a very uncomfortable piece of music. That's all I can really say. Now, if this thing would have animated the way I remembered it, this would have been probably number 3 on the countdown. It'd be right up there at the end. But thankfully, with the animation being a lot more gentle, with the exception of the abrupt cut-in and barely getting any time, kind of rubs myself off the wrong way with the long pause between the background cutting in and it zooming out like it wasn't supposed to be that way. Now, if it immediately zoomed out after, I'd probably be complaining about that as well, but you get rid of that and you get rid of that horrible synth theme, this thing's not even on the list. Now, before I move on, when I was originally conceiving this special all the way back, and I'd like to say 2021, this was originally going to be in I can't really rank this spot because we didn't have the full logo back then. Just that split-second recording and a couple of audio cassette files. I was under the impression this thing would never be seen, but bam, it shows up while I'm stuck at work. But thankfully, now that we know what it looks like, we can have it here on the countdown. And like I said, I am so glad the animation isn't as aggressive and abrupt as I remember it being. Because, yeah, this thing would be in the top 3 if that wasn't the case. I'm just repeating myself at this point, so I'm going to put an end to this segment. How long has it been going? Almost 20 minutes? What the... 13 minutes? What the freak? Anyway, yeah. So once again... thank you to this logo for kind of putting myself on the map. Let's move on. We're going to talk about another logo that doesn't originate here in the United States. For this example, we're going down to Malaysia. On your mark, get set, go. This is a fast one. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're finally getting down to the nitty-gritty. We've reached the point of the countdown where I actually have pre-written statements about all these logos, starting with this one right here. I just got done watching this logo just mere seconds ago, and yeah, I feel really uncomfortable right now, which perfectly helps you get the idea of how I feel when I see any of the 17 logos on this countdown, as well as the 3 dishonorable mentions we'll showcase before number 1. Which number 1, by the way, is pretty similar to this one. You want to know why? Because it, too, has real early CGI animation. Yeah, this thing right here. Ever since I was a young child, one thing I have always been freaked out by has been early CGI. There's just something really terrifying about it that I can't really describe. I told you guys I was going to bring up another commercial I was freaked out by as a young child. This right here is probably the best example I can give that might leave you, the viewer, with that uncomfortable feeling, but I just want you guys to get an idea of why I'm terrified of low budget or early CGI right here.
Do you owe the IRS or state more than $10,000 in back taxes? Well, you can stop stressing right now. At Blue Tax, our team of tax professionals will remove bank levies and wage garnishments fast, stop all collection activity immediately, and negotiate a settlement on your entire tax debt. You can owe way less than you owe. 800-835-6030 for a free consultation. That's 800-835-6030. At Blue Tax.
So yeah, that one right there, I think that one also ran in the early 2010s. That one was really uncomfortable as well. But anyway, yeah, so this right here, this logo is just another example of low budget, early computer graphics that really freaks myself out, and this one takes it up a whole nother level, which we'll describe here pretty soon. Now, once again, I highly doubt that this was intended to leave the negative feeling that I'm getting from it. You got to keep in mind that this was right after CGI really started to take off. You got to remember that before Toy Story hit theaters the year prior, or actually this logo's from 92. At the time I wrote this, we were under the assumption that this thing debuted in 96. That's another example right here. This thing was made long before CGI really had its magnum opus. And keep in mind that this is a smaller, poorer country in Malaysia. They don't have the GDP big countries like the United States or Europe or India, Canada, any of them had. So yeah, you're going to get something poor like this. They can't afford all the big CGI equipment. But yeah, right here, this is just one of those examples of early era CGI that freaked myself out so much as a child. Thankfully, I never saw this logo until, I'd like to say I saw it in one of No Entertainment's countdowns. I think that's how I figured it out, because he always features logos from other countries. Unlike people like myself who really only talk about logos produced in the country I live in, which of course is the United States. Anyway, let's talk about the logo, shall we? First off, let's talk about the character, the figure in this thing. Like, it has no facial features. It has no characteristics whatsoever. Like, it kind of looks like an Academy Award. But the difference between Academy Awards and this is that this thing is in motion while the other is a stationary object. Let's talk about the way this thing runs, too. Like, this thing, it's supposed to be running, hence the fact that the company's called Speedy Video. But he doesn't even really run. In fact, I wouldn't even call this a speed walk. It's just this extremely slow, like it's in slow motion. And you know what it reminds myself of? You know those nightmares you have where you try to run and you can't run, you're moving really, really slow? That's what it reminds myself of here, because I'll have nightmares where I'm getting chased by something and I'm running up the street off of where I live, trying to get into a trail where there's some trees at. The trail is no longer around, but I used to love that thing when I was little. And no matter how fast I ran, I would always be going at walking speeds. And that's what it reminds myself of here. And then the whole thing, the figure itself, it looks real unstable. It looks like the thing's gonna tip over and shatter into a million pieces. I got a lot of nightmares from VeggieTales as a young child. I described one of them in the Lions Group segment. But another one I had was that all the characters on the show were made of glass. And this was like an opening to VeggieTales. And in the background was the theme song to Lassie. And all the characters were just shattering. And this character, well, those characters were kind of transparent glass. This character right here, animation and design-wise, kind of reminds myself of that one traumatizing nightmare from when I was a young child. Either that or it looks like, just for whatever reason, its limbs are just gonna fall off of it and it's gonna tip over, and I feel uncomfortable. It's kind of painful to look at this character. I don't know what it is, but I feel actual physical pain within myself looking at the figure in this logo. And then of course you have the environment that this figure is in. It's just, you have like this unnatural green sky, just any color other than blue or clouds or dark like nighttime like it is now. If the sky's any other color besides what it's normally supposed to be, save for the northern lights, because that's a different spectacle of their own, and One of my favorite hobbies, because it doesn't involve spending money. You just go outside, look up at the driveway, and there they are, flashing in front of you. Just the green sky. It's pretty darn uncomfortable. And then the ground, I can't even describe what that is. It's like some sort of gold nugget texture. You know, it feels like a post-apocalyptic world, like nuclear war broke out and everything's been vaporized and flattened, and this is just the aftermath of it. It's just kind of a dark feeling. And then, of course, the animation, you know, there's way too many glitches in this thing. If you look at it, once again, yeah, this is a low-budget logo. They probably didn't have the budget. Looking on the website, this was a video store. They probably didn't have the budget like all the countries I described had. So yeah, it makes sense, but it's just the way you have all these glitches in it. It feels unfinished. Once again, that wasn't the point with this thing, but it doesn't feel like it was complete, like they did one run through and the executives decide, you know what, that's good enough. We don't have the money to further improve this thing. Put it out on air. Tag it on our VHS tapes or whatever. I don't know what they did with this logo. All I know is that it's on YouTube and I'm freaked out by it. And then finally, just the music. You know, I'm not really freaked out by the music, but at the very end when the logo freezes and that choir, it's just in a low quality, heavily compressed. It's just low quality and heavily compressed. It's like that stupid McDonald's logo from Pakistan that I talked about being freaked out by in an older subscriber spectacular. It's just, you combine all of it together and it's just very unnatural feeling. It doesn't feel like something of this world. It feels like something from an alternate universe. It's just alien. That's the best way I can describe it. And that's why it's so high on this thing. Anyway, if that's said and done, that's Speedy Video. Let's move on to number 5. We're coming back to the United States. And we're going to talk about a logo that I don't really have a description for, but I could probably ad-lib something because this thing was really traumatizing as a young child. And in fact, I'm going to watch the logo before I leave this car to see if I still get that uncomfortable feeling to this day. Here it is, number 5. Yeah, this logo right here, I just watched it, and while I'm not really freaked out by it like I once was, I still feel pretty darn uncomfortable listening to it. Keyword listen. This, along with one other logo, is going to be high up on the countdown where the only thing I can really talk about is the music that it used, because I'm looking at the visuals right now. I have the laptop muted, that way you guys can hear what I'm saying, and I'm playing it over and over, and the visuals aren't exactly giving myself any negative feeling. Sure, it's against a pitch black background, and the colors are kind of dark, and just having the text in sort of a void is kind of unsettling. But other than that, I can't really see any reason to include the logo's animation in the description. It's mainly that music. This was one of those logos I discovered in, I'd like to say, 2006, 2007, back in the early days when I was first really getting into using the computer. And yeah, ever since then, you know, this music is just something that's really unsettling. Like right now, I'm sitting in this dark car, and while I'm not freaked out, I'm still uncomfortable. I feel like someone's just gonna come running up right next to where I'm sitting and bang on the door like that. That's the feeling I get here. Just, you know, during the daytime, there's no issue with the music, but it's like nighttime where everything is uncanny, where it feels like something's coming to get you when I hear the music. And it's just the way the logo makes its appearance, you know? It comes in out of nowhere. It just jumps in out of nowhere, and you have the synth bells, you know? They're just, you know, just the key it's in, and how unnecessarily loud it is. It's uncomfortable more than anything else. And then the way it ends, it just kind of cuts out like nothing happened. You know, it just comes in, it blasts the bells at you, and just like that, blank, it's done. Nothing happened. This never happened. And that's really how I feel about this thing, you know? There's nothing else I can really describe, but man, that's a pretty hostile sounding piece of music. I'm gonna play it again and see if I can't give you an initial reaction. You're gonna hear it. Let's see how I feel. And right as I talk about that, someone's using their car over there and I can hear the rumbling. Like, you know, I feel fine when the music plays, but afterwards, where it's just silence, that's where I feel uncomfortable. Like, I'm looking out at the driveway, like, it feels like it just sounds like one of those cues that you need to run, you're in danger, something's after you, your life is in danger, you're in peril. You need to run right now, or you are going to be harmed. That's just what it feels like. Like I said, I'm not really uncomfortable with the logo unless it's dark outside, but like, there were times when I was a young child where I would try to go to sleep. Same thing as the Southern Star description I gave you. And all I could hear in my head in a pitch black silent room was this. Just hold on. I'm going to give you an example right here, right now. I hope I could give you guys an idea of what I was talking about there, but yeah, you know, just the music is the main reason it's up so high, mainly because it messed with my head so much as a child, and to this day, at the age of 27, almost 28, it's September 22nd when I record this right now. We are less than a month away from my 28th birthday, October 21st, by the way. We'll probably still be producing this special by then. But, you know, it's the way it bursts out at you, it blasts those synth bells at you in an uncomfortably loud volume. And then at the very end, you know, it just cuts out like nothing happened. And, you know, it's just the way the music is composed and the way that it's timed. This is really all I'm going to say on this logo because, unfortunately, I don't really have much else to talk about when it comes to this thing. But yeah, I hope you guys can get kind of an understanding of why it's so high. This is just an example of how something that is simply just music can really get in your head. Nonetheless, Filmways was one of my favorite companies logo-wise as a young child. And a lot of good memories when I see the font because the 1981 logo was one of those holy grails. We looked forever for that thing. It was kind of in the same situation the TAT Communications Company or the DTS Water Drop was in, if you weren't around at the time.
when it comes to rare logos that were long sought out. That one's one of my all-time favorites, but this one right here, you know, it's just uncomfortable. That's the best way I can describe it. Let's get down to number 4. You guys all know that WGBH is my all-time favorite logo. But what happens when you take the logo and you go a little too far with it? Well, you get this.
WGBH, Boston.
Just a warning, if I sound out of breath talking about this one, I just got done with cardio. Been doing it every other day on days I have to work. Get on the exercise bicycle, try to go at least 15 miles. If I have the day off for such, I run at least 1 mile around the neighborhood from my house and back, or the Teacup Studio as I refer to it. Still have to do the push-ups, sit-ups, and sumo squats, but simply put, trying to get back in shape like I was back in early 2020, pre-lockdown, when I was supposed to get into the professional wrestling business. And if you want to go even further back, haven't really done any exercise like this in about a decade since high school football. So those last 2 times, back when I was an athlete, I guess you can say it. Okay, you guys don't want to talk about my cardio. You're here to hear about this logo, so let's get into it. Thankfully, everything I have to say about this logo, I have memorized in my head right here. So this one right here, it's no secret WGBH is my favorite logo, and it's also no secret that as a young child, this thing was the #1 source of my nightmares. Well, out of all the different versions of the neon sign, as they call it these days, I'm old enough to remember when we called it the Flash of Doom. This is the one that really did damage when I was little. And I'm kind of torn on this one. I want to appreciate it, but at the same time, it was so traumatizing as a child that I can't do anything but rip it to shreds. So I'm going to do both. I'll spend more time tearing this thing apart than I do giving any praise to it. But do know that I do like this logo, but also do know that this thing really screwed with myself as a child, which is why it's so high up here. And this isn't going to be the only WGBH logo we talk about. We're also going to talk about another one when we get to the dishonorable mentions, which I've upped to having 5, because there's 2 that I just needed to include on it. Don't worry, the descriptions on all of those will be shorter than this, at least I hope. It depends on how much I have to say about them. Well, we've been going for over 3 minutes already since I started shooting. Better start getting into the logo, shall we? So what happens when you take the already polarizing WGBH logo, you know, so many people talk about, oh, this scared myself so much as a child, and you up the ante to 300% from the original? Well, this is what you get right here. And the reason why I'm talking about it this way is because a lot of people remember seeing this logo as children after the PBS Kids block had come to an end, between that and when they were going to regular adult programming. So yeah, I can imagine 7-year-old little Timmy wetting his pants seeing this thing after watching Sesame Street. Yeah, I know that show's on HBO Max these days, Max, whatever they call it. But you gotta go back. We're talking like kids around 2006, 2007. Let's break this thing apart and dissect it, shall we? First and foremost, if you look at the original logo, the way it draws out the outline, then it comes in and draws in the text. It does it in a fairly slow enough manner
that you have time to prepare for the extreme part of the logo where it flashes and fills the screen. Here, it just immediately gets right into it, right away, bang! You got a big yellow flash in front of you, just out of nowhere. And before you can even comprehend what's going on, suddenly you have a bunch of CGI neon tubes bouncing up at you. It immediately makes its entrance and presence known within the first 2 seconds. Just immediately pops its way in and starts its animation with little to no preparation time. And then the way the tubes fill in, the camera, it jerks around and follows it, but it gets way in your face, and it feels like it's trying to attack you. It feels like it's angry at you, and it's trying to breach the television to come and slap you or something, or like I said at the start, it's waiting under your bed to strangle you. The best way I can describe how the camera jerks in and out and just constantly in your face. You know when you disturb a wasp nest and they all come out to attack you? I've never had that happen before, once when I was little. But, that's what it reminds myself of. You've disturbed a wasp nest, now the whole colony's flying out to get at you. To make you pay for getting near their nest. And then the music in the background, it's pretty calm, You have the music, they mess with it to make it sound like it's happening inside the filling tubes. But then suddenly out of nowhere, bam, the next part of the logo just comes right out at you. It just instantly jerks out, and suddenly now you have the entire logo lighting up. And what makes this part especially bad is the sudden increase in volume. I talked about how the beginning part, the music's kind of quiet. It depends on the distance between the camera and where the tube's filling in. And then, of course, you have the whooshing sounds as it goes by. But here, suddenly, the whole thing powers up and the audio just doubles, if not triples, even quadruples in volume. And it's just kind of like one of those unintentional jump scares. Just bam, suddenly you got loud noise. And then you have all the whooshing sounds just constantly coming up, and now you have the sound of wind in the background. It's kind of an overload sensory-wise, because you got the overly loud synth music, and then you have all the whooshing and the wind sound. The final part really isn't that bad, where the camera tilts out and the logo flashes. I really have no issue with the announcer. I'm used to hearing him because back in the day on King 5, that was the announcer that signs you on to King 5 News up here in Seattle. But it's just the end of the synth there. It doesn't sound like the original piece of music that was written in 71 for the zooming logo. Like, it sounds shrill. It sounds a lot more distant than it originally did. You know how sometimes in your nightmares you'll hear things that you heard in real life, but somehow it's distorted and screwed around enough with to sound frightening? That's what it reminds myself of here. They completely messed around with the audio to the point that it just sounds ghoulish. That's such a stupid word, but, and then finally when the logo ends, the 2 comes on, it quickly flashes, then it glows and burns out. Nothing really upsetting about that, but just after the intensity of the original logo, all the twists and turns, the unstable sound control, which isn't unstable on purpose. They definitely have better sound control than I did, but just as extreme as the first 3/4 of the logo is, I know I've said this a lot recently, but it feels like something's going to jump out at you, because we went from all those that loud synth music, that blaring wind and whooshing, and now it's just quiet, and you have that gentle neon transformer buzz. And yeah, at the end, I guess it can get to you when it suddenly burns out, I guess you can say, but it feels like something's coming out to get you at that point.
The other thing, what really screwed with myself is just the environment this thing is, because, to quote an old scare factor on this thing, other than the neon, it's pitch black. It's a completely blank void. And, you know, the environment surrounding the logo is what made myself most uncomfortable as a young child. Just being in a completely pitch black environment, other than the neon, it's completely dark. I think it's pretty self-explanatory to talk about right there. So yeah, that pretty much explains it, but I've got to give praise to the people behind this, you know? Maybe it wasn't the smartest idea to put this on after children's programming, but from a adult standpoint, this is an absolutely amazing logo. Sure, the first part of the animation where the text fills in and such, it's definitely a product of its time. CGI was still being developed at that time. I would love to see them redo this logo right here with modern CGI, what we have right here. Like, give it a huge budget. I want to see what they can do with it. But yeah, the end part where it zooms out and the logo flashes, the first time I saw this thing, I thought to myself, that is not CGI. That is an actual neon sign. That has to be. There's no way that's CGI, and I'm pretty sure the whole thing's CGI, but even when the two flashes and the camera kind of vibrates, like, it feels very, very realistic, and I wouldn't be surprised if an actual neon was used for this thing, even though it wasn't. Last but not least, when I talk about this logo, outside of WGBH's original Western Avenue headquarters, at the lobby, they had an actual neon sign in the shape of this logo. And I tell you, if I could go back in time and rescue this thing, because they just left it to rot after they moved to their present-day studio, I'd snatch that thing up in a heartbeat. That would make a killer nightlight. But yeah, that's the logo right here. You know, I'm kind of 50-50 with this one. I want to appreciate it, like I told you, but at the same time, it did so much damage to myself as a child that I have no choice but to completely chastise and scold it for being so extreme. This is what happens when you take the original logo and you just multiply up the ante to ridiculous levels. And they did this again about a decade later. They messed with it and made another neon version of the logo. But the difference between that one and this one, the reason that one's not on here, is because that one takes place in a less dark environment. And also because the animation isn't as extreme as this one, with it just jerking in and out with the camera motions and blasting all the noise at you. So yeah, I gotta give shout out to the guys at GBH. Please bring back the W. You know, I'm going to stop there. You'll hear all about my thoughts whenever I get to the post-mortem special, which I shot all the way back in 2020. I'm pretty sure that's what you guys will vote for next. I already know how it's going to go. Alright, I'm done talking. Let's take you back into the house right now. I'm going to introduce you to the end. Let's get back in there right now.
Are you f***ing serious, Tua? Another f***ing interception? Why the f*** did I choose this f***ing team? Oh, hey, how you doing? So what'd you think of the special, guys? It's still going? There's how many logos left? It's how long? What the fuck? Ladies and gentlemen, I've got good news and bad news. The good news, I'm 1 month into my exercise routine, and thankfully some results are starting to come out. Very happy about this. The other good news, this thing's almost over. There's light at the end of the tunnel. Unfortunately, the latter of the good news comes with an asterisk, because the bad news, there's still 3 logos and multiple dishonorable mentions to get through. I'd like to personally apologize to each and every one of you. Really did not expect this thing to go as long as it actually did. My original intention was to produce maybe a 45-minute special, but this thing's going to come out being 3-4 hours long. Guess that love and passion for logos I disowned at the start of this thing is still there. Once again, I don't really hate logos. I haven't really moved on. Like all my other interests, it kind of comes and goes. Like one moment, it'll be the only thing I care about. The next moment, I want nothing to do with it. It's just kind of that weird thing. And it's also kind of some self-loathing about the fact that my train and siren content doesn't do very well, and that people really only come to this channel for logos. That's kind of soured myself as well. But that's fine. People can like whatever they like. I'm going to keep producing what I'm producing, and people watch it, whatever. Anyway, enough rambling. Let's talk about number 3 on the countdown. Let's talk about Anacortes, Washington. You might be wondering what I'm talking about. You'll understand here in a moment. So Anacortes is a town in my area. It's in the area, but at the same time, it takes a while to get there. You got to go down Interstate 5 from Bellingham. You got to get off at Burlington, get on Highway 20, and then it's another 20-30 miles till you get there. A very isolated town. I have a bit of history of Anacortes. Back in the summer of 2020, during the lockdown, went down there for the tsunami siren test. But other than that, pretty much all of my history is between them and their high school. Their high school is in the same athletic conference as the high schools up here. When I played football in high school, they were a common opponent on sub-varsity teams. And even today, still working with multiple high schools across the county. I have to see Anacortes multiple times a year. Football, wrestling, baseball. Well, not exactly football, but mainly wrestling and baseball. I see them a lot. They've got a killer program. They're kind of the final boss when it comes to football and baseball. Anacortes is also the alma mater of one Craig Bartlett, best known for creating the Nickelodeon show Hey Arnold. Hey Arnold is often referred to as one of the most beloved and memorable Nicktoons of all time. The logo at the end is memorable too, but in another way. Oh boy. This logo right here. Now, yes, I do realize that it's not visually assaulting like the logo we just saw, or maybe the Klasky Chapeau logo we saw at the start of this thing, but it earns its spot here by audio alone. And you want to know why? Because I had a really traumatizing experience with this logo as a child. For the longest time, I was debating whether or not I wanted to put this one in the number 3 spot or the one you guys just saw. But this one won outright because of how traumatized I was by it as a young child. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, it's story time. So this takes place in, this would be in 2004. This was sometime after Hey Arnold came to an end, The show was done, but it was still recent and relevant enough that Nickelodeon was putting it on in reruns early in the morning. Now, this took place just before 8 a.m. I was awake pretty early this morning because I had just discovered a little-known cartoon called SpongeBob SquarePants. You might have heard of it. That show also ended the same year Hey Arnold did. They did a big theatrical film that served as the show's finale, and I really hope that Nickelodeon respected the crew's wishes and let SpongeBob SquarePants end with the movie. I sure hope it's not still going on today and that Nickelodeon refuses to let it end because it's their cash cow and they refuse to let any other cartoon succeed on their network. That would be stupid. They wouldn't do that now, would they? Anyway, I had gone out of bed early in hopes that, hey, maybe it's going to come on early because, they would run Nicktoons early in the morning. Nick at Night would end at 6 a.m. and they do about 2-3 hours of Nicktoons before, the Nick Jr. block came on. I had never seen Hey Arnold before. I really only tuned in for a few shows, so, Rugrats, All Grown Up, Drake and Josh, The Amanda Show, Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius, SpongeBob SquarePants, of course, and then my personal favorite was The Fairly Odd Parents. Those were the shows I tuned in for. If it was something I didn't care about, I didn't really pay any attention. But I was out of bed early in hopes that they would run episodes of SpongeBob SquarePants. I wasn't really paying attention to the television. I don't know what I was doing. I was in the living room. This was back when anyway, so I don't know what I was doing, but they were doing the split screen credits, it ended, and then this logo popped up. And I wasn't really freaked out by the logo design itself. I thought it looked pretty neat. It was the audio that played underneath, you had the barbershop quartet or whatever it was singing the company name, and then you had that weird high-pitched beep. It was pretty darn startling. You know when you get scared by something and you just drop everything to look up at it? That's what happened. I was pretty mesmerized by this noise. But that wasn't the end of it. Then the second half of the music played. That clay flute sound, whatever it is. That noise. That frickin' noise. That was, without a shadow of a doubt, the scariest frickin' thing I had ever heard in my entire life. It was that terrifying. I felt like my life was in danger. It triggered a fight or flight response that I had never experienced before. I was that terrified by that noise. It was just so loud and so haunting and so ghastly. And I don't remember how long it was, but afterwards I found myself lying on the floor in the fetal position, shaking. I was that freaking terrified of that noise. Now, I don't know how long I was on the ground for, but time slowed down. It felt like forever. I actually felt physical pain listening to it. Just the scariest thing I had ever heard. And to say that I had nightmares would be an understatement. For the next 2 weeks straight, and then after that it would be a recurring nightmare. Every now and then, I would get this nightmare where I would be running down an endless pitch black alley like a brick wall on both sides, and all you could do was run forward and it would just go on forever and ever, and I would be chased by this noise like it was out to get myself, and no matter how fast I would run in this dream, it would continue to catch up, and just before I'd wake up, it would be deafeningly loud. And I would always wake up screaming and crying.
It's absolutely traumatizing. To say that I could be on my own at nighttime, that no longer happened. I always had to be around a family member because I was that terrified of the noise. You know, if I was laying in my bed and it was dark and quiet, all that would play in my head would be that noise. And like, it didn't even sound like it was coming from my mind. It sounded like it was coming from the closet and it was going to come barging out. Just never had anything as traumatizing as that frickin' noise. Now, thankfully, Hey Arnold was taken off the air not long after. But I would still get that recurring nightmare. I would still remember that noise from time to time. And it still scarred myself. Even with the show it was on and the logo being long gone from television. In fact, I don't think it appeared again until Thanksgiving Day 2007. Because the Nicktoons Network, they did a marathon of first episodes of each of their Nicktoons. And Hey Arnold was one of the ones they ran. And hearing that noise for the first time, because it'd been about a year or two. You know, I'd like to say the nightmares ended around 2005, and I kind of forgot about it after that, because I went out of my way to avoid Nickelodeon prior to 8 in the morning. Keep in mind, I did not get out of bed until 8 in the morning. Anything prior to 8 a.m. was uncharted territory that I rarely, if ever, visited unless I had to be out of bed early for family vacations or stuff like that. When I heard the audio for the first time, it was still pretty darn frightening. I was pretty scared by it when I heard it again in 2007 when logo capture started appearing on live video. Thankfully, though, it wasn't traumatizing. I was in kindergarten when I heard this audio for the first time. That might be why I was so freaked out by it. But, yeah, just that darn bad. Thankfully, Hey Arnold kind of disappeared again until I'd like to say when the 90s or all that block came up. Except when they reran Hey Arnold on there, instead of using this version of the logo, they just put up the actual logos from the original show's credits. You know, the game's animation, and then the in association with Sneeush. And then, of course, they'd cut it out, put in the 2009 Nickelodeon Productions logo with its music in the background. There were rumors that they would accidentally play the first half of this version of the logo, then the second half would get cut out by the 2009 Nickelodeon logo. I am so glad I never encountered this, and I am so glad that this version of the logo is retired. In the modern day of 2025, it's October 20th as I record this narration. I'm not really freaked out by it anymore. You know, I don't get traumatized. I don't get nightmares. I don't get scared of it at all. But it's still pretty darn unpleasant to listen to. It's not the easiest thing to listen to. Just because I've grown out of that traumatizing experience doesn't mean that it's not an uncomfortable piece of music anymore. And you know what the sad thing about this is? The original version of this track isn't that bad. I'm going to play it for you right here. This is the original version of the track they used for this version of the logo. Right here. Isn't it sad? That version, it's just so happy and nice sounding. It really fits in with the jazzy tone the show had, the jazzy urban city life that show had. And it's just, they mutilated it when they played it on television. Here's a comparison. I'll play the original one more time, and then I'll play the audio from the television broadcast so you guys can hear the difference.
It's just really sad. It's such a nice, cheerful piece of music. It sounds like something you'd hear on a radio station when they call out their call sign. It's just so sad that they took this nice piece of music and just completely turned it upside down and turned it into whatever the frick it was when it broadcasted on television. It really does make myself sad. It breaks my heart that they screwed it up the way they did. Yeah, so that's pretty much the story. It gets its spot on this countdown. Thanks to that traumatizing experience I had. Once again, I really didn't have anything else I could say about the logo itself because it's just a still image. A while back, a YouTube user, Procrastination Genie, did a remake of this logo combination. And someone asked, I don't understand why so many people are freaked out by this. And he gave what I like to consider the definitive response. This is the perfect explanation for why so many people were freaked out by it. And I'm going to read it to you guys verbatim right now. You basically had to see it on TV at the time to understand why it was seen as creepy as it was. Remember that most people who saw this logo were around 3 to 9 years old and saw it usually either late at night or very early in the morning. So the theme of the logo was unlike anything they were used to hearing. The main thing that made it scary was that it ended Hey Arnold on a rather somber note every single episode. It just felt out of place to the usual uplifting tone of the show. I really need to practice reading out loud. There's no reason I need to make these many mistakes. Another thing that made it creepy was that the logo theme itself was broadcast in mono and sped up instead of being in its original intended sound format. As a result, the overlapping voices made the choir sound unnatural, like a choir of ghosts instead of a barbershop quartet. The process also made the flute gong sound almost deafeningly loud out of nowhere, which made the whole theme seem like it was composed on a possessed burial ground. Wonder if it was the same burial ground the Dolphin Stadium was built on. Also, that bird drawing really creeped me out. It doesn't really affect me anymore, mainly because I got used to it, but it's not very pleasing to listen to either way. The last time I saw it on TV was around summer 2008, and I was still scared of it then. I'm just speaking from personal experiences here. That right there is the definitive reason why so many people were freaked out by this. And he brings up a bunch of points that I told you guys about in my description, I saw this thing early in the morning when I wasn't usually awake. I was like 5 or 6 years old when I saw this thing. A real young child. I'm so glad I never saw this thing late at night, because it would have definitely been number 1 on this countdown if that would have been the case. But yeah, and then how they mess with the audio for television broadcasts. He brings up so many points that I emphasized talking about this logo. Last but not least, regarding the logo design, this is another short story. Back in late 2018, I learned that we had a junior hockey team up in my area, the Bellingham Blazers. And wouldn't you know it, their arch rival, the Seattle Totems, who actually play in a suburb called Mount Lake Terrace, had this as their logo. So it made it real easy to cheer for the Blazers, to beat up on a team that wears the same crest, pretty much the same crest as what you see in this logo right here, because even looking at this image right here, it just looks way too similar. And when I see that bird, I'm reminded of that clay flute noise, and it makes myself feel uncomfortable. Like, once again, I feel like someone's gonna come barging up to the car window and like that. That's how I feel thinking about, like something's out to get myself. That's how I am with all of these logos on this countdown pretty much. But anyway, getting back to the story, April Fool's upload in 2019, I made fun of this logo right here, using the Seattle Totems crest instead, right here. So I just thought I'd add that in because, I just thought it was funny they used kind of the same symbol. But all in all, once again, yeah, this logo right here isn't really visually offensive unless you're really freaked out by that bird. But that audio was so traumatizing. I had such a traumatizing experience with this logo the first time I saw it that it automatically earns a top 3 spot on this countdown. And that's all there really is to say with this one. Wow, we've been going for almost 20 minutes. I had a lot to say about this one. The next logo on this countdown, which we won't try to spend as much time talking about because this was a long description. I know you guys want to get off your day. This next logo also appeared on children's programming, but the difference is that instead of it appearing at the end of a television show, it appeared at the end of videotapes. And man, this one is a bad motherfucker. Here it is. What is this? I'm dead serious. What is this? You think I'm kidding? What the fuck is this? What sick, twisted individual decided that this would be the perfect way to end a videotape for little children? I don't mean to get angry like that, but I'm dead serious. This is way too inappropriate to put at the end of programming made for little children. Was the person that made this so angry that little 7-year-old Timmy wanted to watch their products that he decided to scar them for life after watching Commander Toad in space? This logo pisses myself off. It is way too inappropriate to be shown on VHS tapes made for little 5-year-old children. Now, if you compare this to the version they used at the start of shows, this thing is the absolute polar opposite. Here's the opening version. You see that one right there, the opening version? It's fun, it's happy and cheerful. It welcomes you to the VHS tape you're about to watch. This logo, on the other hand, is the polar opposite. And no, I'm not going to apologize for my anger because this one pisses myself the fuck off. I'm gonna try to calm down. Let's walk through this logo real quick. So it begins, you're floating through space. You're floating through space, very uncomfortable. And you have just this really freaky ass humming playing in the background. You know, it reminds myself of the Lions Group logo. You know how it feels like something's wrong and something's gonna jump out at you? Guess what? That's exactly what happens because BAM! Here comes a fucking comet right at your face! You know, it stares at you for a few seconds and then bang! It just crashes into the screen and suddenly you have a bunch of gold colors flashing in your face. Where the fuck did that come from? And then afterwards you have the Golden Book video logo. Except even it is a little too ominous for my liking. You know, instead of it being welcoming and happy and cheerful, it's just sinister. It stares at you as that music in the background just becomes outright hostile. And by this point, you know, those planets and moons you saw at the start of this thing, nope, they're nowhere to be seen. They're long gone. You're just out in the middle of nowhere in space as this thing stares you down and that fucking synth hum plays in the background. And then right after that, the fucking thing just teleports out of there and you're left with this frickin' empty space background. And you just get the feeling that you're stuck out in the middle of nowhere and you're gonna float off to your death because no one's gonna be able to find you because you're just alone in space. I'm dead serious. The person that decided to greenlight this logo needs to be slapped in the fucking face. That's really all there is to say about this logo. I'm too pissed off to continue. Let's get into the dishonorable mentions, shall we? And then we can finally talk about number 1, which also appeared on VHS tapes. Welcome to the dishonorable mentions. You are near the end. This final set of logos right here, I want to say there's about 20 of them. Yeah, they set myself off, but they're not horrifying to the point where they warrant a full induction on this special. One of these days in the future, most likely after the perpetually postponed Teacup Entertainment rebrand, I'm working on it. We just have this batch of productions. I will go in and I will do commentary on each of the logos you see here. Anyway, I want to get this thing done. Here are all 20 logos, no commentary. I'm just flashing them up on the screen. I'll see you right after this montage, and we'll talk about the number 1 most uncanny logo on my personal rankings. Here we go. Alright, here we are. This is the moment you've all been waiting for, the #1 most uncanny logo, in my personal opinion. But first, the surprise 18th logo to the countdown! Yeah, I know, I'm not happy about it either, but, this one began doing damage to myself, while I was producing this, and it did enough that it can't just be a dishonorable mention. So we're going to talk about this logo right here, because it's not just this logo here, but it also exposes a trend that I'm both fascinated by and horrified by at the same time, something I've used myself. Now this logo is an MGM logo, I can tell you that for sure, but it's not exactly the MGM logo you might be thinking of. What? Were you expecting the lion? Unlike most people, I never really had an issue with the lion. The only time I was kind of unsettled by it, there was a, version of the MGM television logo where it was zoomed in all the way in to where you just saw the lion, and that was pretty freaky. But other than that, I've never really had any issue. And I shouldn't have any issue with this logo either, but unfortunately, that is not the case. You know, at first glance, you look at this logo and, yeah, you know, it's just your average product from the modern era of logo design, you know. It's not great, but it's not terrible either. You can see they put some effort into it compared to other logos. But, yeah, so why is this thing here? Why is this a late edition? This was originally going to be a dishonorable mention, but unfortunately, during production of this special, this logo really started doing things with my head. You want to know why this thing warrants an actual induction rather than a simple dishonorable mentions notice? It's because this logo has become the villain in a reoccurring nightmare that happens every time I see this logo. I am dead serious. Let's talk about it, shall we? So, if you don't know, you should know. I like watching soap operas. Yeah, I know, those are made for women and I'm a man. Whatever, I don't care. I like watching them. My favorite soap opera is The Bold and the Beautiful, which is a CBS soap opera. You only have like 5 soap operas on television these days. You have Young and the Restless, Beyond the Gates, and Bold and the Beautiful on CBS. Days of Our Lives, it used to be on NBC, now it's just a streaming show on Peacock. And then you have General Hospital on ABC. But, Bold and the Beautiful is my favorite one because it's only half an hour long and it doesn't eat away at your attention span like the others do. But up here, Cairo 7, which is the local station in Seattle, which is down south, they run the show at 2 p.m. Now the show traditionally runs at 12:30 p.m., but Cairo 7's a special little snowflake. They have to run it at 2 p.m. because they just have to do an hour-long newscast, which is really irritating. It didn't used to be that way, but now it is. At least it gives myself that nice little lunch break if I'm at home and want to watch all 3 of them, which is kind of hard to do when you have to keep catching up with them when you're always working. But anyway, enough rambling. So Bold and the Beautiful comes on at 2 p.m., and then afterwards they run a pair of episodes of Judy Justice, which is the current version of Judge Judy, which was a childhood favorite of mine. So when they finally got the rights to rerun Judy Justice, I was pretty excited. Finally, I get to see new cases. And yeah, the logo was pretty neat to see, you know. It's kind of weird seeing the Amazon name next to the MGM name, but whatever. But then it started appearing in the
dumbest nightmare ever that happens every time I see this logo, and this nightmare is going to happen multiple times in these next couple of weeks as I finalize this production and get it ready for broadcast. How does this nightmare go? I've been rambling for a really long time now. Here's how it goes. So in this nightmare, I'm sitting in my living room, watching television, then out of nowhere, for no reason, this logo will appear on the television. And you know what happens? Whenever it appears on the television, after it gets done shining or whatever it does at the start, I get sucked into the television. And I am forced to spend the rest of eternity floating in that black void in front of the logo. And the only time I am ever able to see the outside world again is when the logo airs on television. And when it does in this dream, a small little window in front of where I'm helplessly floating will appear, and I'll be able to see into the living room for the 3 or 4 seconds that the logo is on screen. And yeah, that's the nightmare. It's stupid. It's ridiculous. But you know, now that I think of it, it's just how the brain works, you know. Your brain will take certain harmless things and screw with them to the point that they come off as unsettling. And that's pretty much the reasoning behind the 18 logos on this countdown and the 22 featured in the dishonorable mentions that will get their own special in the future that hopefully won't take 3 to 4 hours to get through. Yeah, and it's gotten to the point that I actively avoid watching anything that has this logo on it because I hate that nightmare. It's just so stupid and it makes no sense. And I actually feel uncomfortable whenever I see the logo. This is a dead serious true story, by the way. So if that was just the only reason why this logo was on here, it would simply be left for the dishonorable mentions. But looking at this logo, it actually exposed a sort of trend that I finally picked up on. And it's something that I've always been freaked out by. Gold, yellow, or orange text against a pitch black background. Just any gold, orange, or yellow symbols, word marks, etc. Whenever I see things like that, it either triggers fear for some reason, or in other cases, it'll trigger disgust. Which, from what I've seen online, disgust is a form of fear. And I have a few examples. So, this Golden Books Family Entertainment logo, just the orange text, especially how it flashes, yeah, I'm kind of uncomfortable watching that. The Golden Harvest logo that you saw at the dishonorable mention segment, yeah, it's a yellow symbol and flashy yellow text. Not a fan of it. The Rick Reinert Productions logo. You know, flashing orange symbols. This, around the same time I was freaked out by that Warner Brothers television logo, I was trying to go to bed, and then this thing popped up in my head. And it was very uncomfortable. I could not sleep after that. The Lorimar Productions logo from 1978, The Line of Doom. Yeah, that logo emits a weird disgust that I can't describe. Same with this one right here, the Universal Studios Florida mention on the credits for Swamp Thing. Just the orange Florida text and the glow around it. I've always gotten a weird feeling of both fear and disgust whenever I see it. The aforementioned Bryanston Pictures logo that you saw in the dishonorable mentions. You know, yellow text against a blank background. That kind of does that glowy, shiny thing. Yeah, that's pretty unsettling. Even that McDonald's logo that I talk about being terrified of, it could fall into that category. Because look, it's a big golden object against a pitch black void. The one thing I forgot to mention right here, Not just the solid text, but especially if it does like a flashy or shiny effect. And then, of course, the biggest offender, this Ruby Spears Enterprises logo. One of my all-time favorites, but it always gives off this weird disgust. I don't know, just whenever I see things like this, I'm reminded of old moldy macaroni and cheese. I don't know how else to describe it, but that's just the feeling I get. And you know, it extends to things that aren't even on blank backgrounds. It can even extend to other things. That Mad Dog Productions logo from the dishonorable mentions. I'm not scared of the dog. It's the weird looking yellow text. The KUED Salt Lake City logo from 1979. Yeah, it brings this feeling of fear, disgust, and I weirdly feel pain whenever I see this one. Same with this one right here, the ABC TV logo from Australia. Yeah, I'm not very, I don't like that one either. In fact, it even extends into other things that don't have anything to do with logos, like the credits for The Simpsons. It's yellow text against a pitch black background. And yeah, you have the happy, Simpsons music in the background, but yeah, it still emits that same feeling. A while back, Family Guy did this, joke making fun of how The Simpsons would always end on a, high note, some sort of real good joke, and they flashed this up here. Yeah, I was not expecting that, and I actively jumped when I saw this. This Nickelodeon Japan sign-off, whatever this thing is right here, whatever show this is, if anyone knows what show this is, please let myself know. Yeah, I'm uncomfortable looking at this one as well. And then the, my favorite logo combination of all time is, this one right here, Rattlesnake Productions and Reicher Entertainment. But in between the logos, you've got black text, black background with yellow text. I had this weird nightmare years ago that there were these evil muscular men wearing plain black t-shirts with this on them, and if they caught you, you would be forced to live in the Siringo movie. And you had to choose where you wanted to live, and for some reason I chose the Rattlesnake Productions logo, even though I've always wanted to live in this city on the Reicher logo. Yeah, just kind of awkward. But at the same time, you know, what doesn't help is the fact that this trope of yellow, orange, or gold text on a pitch black background is something I actively use, and I have multiple examples. Back in this past March when I redid the EW Holdings logo, I actively went in and tried to recreate that same exact discomfort I get with this trope, and it worked a little too well because I get the shivers every time I see my own creation. When I rebranded in December of 2018, you know, here's the logo right here. It's pitch black background, yellow text, and at the end, it shines. The opening logo for Collie Entertainment from 2019, that one uses that same exact, gold text, flashy, whatever. Independence Day Siren Clusterfuck that I did in 2019 and 2020. This is the first thing that comes to my head when I think of this trope. Rounded yellow text, gold text against a pitch black background. I even did the same thing for several siren test uploads I did. And especially, you know, this right here, this time card I did on kind of a humorous version of it. Would you look at that? It shines. It kind of reminds myself of the Amazon MGM Studios logo. Several of the weather radio tests I did back in the day had this. There were even a couple of episodes, even LARDLOGO's train videos uses yellow text, and then the end credits are the yellow text on a black background. In fact, right here, this was the color palette template I used. I'd put this image in the editor, and I'd use the pick color whenever I was editing. click on the image, and that's where the gold text came from. In fact, recent shows I've used the ITC souvenir font, and the text is orange. You can see it right here. In fact, if you haven't noticed it already, I've kind of been playing into this trend the whole time. Look at the text I use on this special. It's in a font I find unsettling, and it's also that yellow text. So yeah, that's pretty much all there is to say. I was originally just going to do this as a dishonorable mention, but would you look at that? It actually exposed a whole nother trend that I did not realize I was so freaked out about until I really looked into it. That's really all there is to say about this one. I promise you guys, I swear on the Bible, this is the last logo we're going to feature on this countdown before number 1. Let's get you back into the studio. Let's introduce number 1. Let's go in right now.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, here we are. This is the end. The light at the end of the tunnel. No additional installments to the countdown are here. We are going right into number 1 on the countdown. Golden Book Video distributed VHSs. This company did also. The only difference? They were based out of Japan, not the United States. What might this logo that really sets myself off be? Well, here it is.
And there you have it. The number 1 logo on the countdown. The most uncanny logo ever produced, in my personal opinion. Pony Canyon's way of advertising their company on VHS tapes between the years of 1989 and 1991 is the number 1 most unsettling logo I've ever seen at this point in time. Will there be another one in the future that takes the cake? Only time will tell, but yeah. This logo right here. Now this special's been really long. We breached the 3-hour mark. So I'm going to try to talk about this logo as quickly as I can, because I know you guys are tired, you're fatigued, you want to go on with your day. This thing's already an hour longer than your average motion picture. So let's get into it. So, remember how I talked about how low budget or early generation CGI was really unsettling to myself? It's right here on display. Now, there's no doubting. Why am I stuttering? Japan is one of the greatest technological pioneers in the world, so this logo is absolutely amazing for its time. But enough with the praise. I've got a lot to say about this one, and I'm trying to keep this segment short. So, take Speedy Video, turn that upside down, and merge it together with the first 2 Klasky Chapeau logos, and this is what you get right here. Now, instead of simply rambling on and on about this one, I'm going to walk you guys through this one. Now, I'm just going to put pictures up of the logo. I'm not going to play it again because, yeah, something epileptic seizures, that background could trigger something. I don't really know. But I will give you guys this slideshow to tell you about it, because the best way to describe this one is how I feel about each part of the logo. So, being someone that has autism, I don't like talking about it, but I have to bring it up in this point. One thing I absolutely hate are eyes, especially eye contact, especially giant, angry-looking eyes. Well, guess what happens here? Right at the start, bam, it just jumps out of nowhere. Now, thankfully, on a few VHS, Betamax releases, because those were still going at the time, the logo will fade in. But here it just immediately cuts in, and you are greeted by this giant angry eyeball. It just floats around and stares at you. It's like it's silently judging you. And it just comes off as feeling really hostile. It feels like it's going to attack you, like it's out to get you. And guess what happens? It does! It rams into the screen. And then we get the biggest offender with this logo. The number one reason it's here. This part right here. You have this really weird, uncanny environment, shapes floating all over the place, and you have this detached face just laughing at you. And just, it has these weird alien vacuum sounding noises representing its laughing. And once again, you feel really unsettled looking at this. Why does it sound so weird? Why is it laughing? Am I supposed to believe that this thing is harmless after that eye just rammed into us? Then it dives into the unthinkable. Bam! Now it's suddenly angry at you, and it makes this absolutely nightmare-inducing face. I have had several nightmares about being chased by this angry face right here. And it continues to make those weird elephant noises. And you know, the one thing I get from this face right here, the one thing that it relays is, I'm going to harm you, which is obviously not going to happen if you listen to the monologue way at the start of this thing. I feel like I've needed to shave 5 times since I started this thing, which I don't even shave anyway. I just trim the facial hair. But yeah, you get this face right here, but thankfully it's only on screen for a couple of seconds. And then the scene slides off screen, and you get this. You get this cute little guy right here, and you have this background right here. It's very aesthetically pleasing. But this little guy right here, this is just the intermission in this menagerie of horrors. Right in, out of nowhere, you get this creature right here. It stares at you. And as that goes on, those giant eyes, they widen and the pupils dilate. And then yet another creature quickly whizzes by, and it too has really big eyes if you look at it closely. And the other one's making this really bizarre noise. And then it transitions to this thing right here. Yet another bouncy, rubbery creature that has giant eyes that it's staring at you, but at the same time it isn't staring at you either. And right as this is happening, bam, here comes another jump scare. This faceless object just jumps out at you. And then you get some actual violence in this thing. They actually harm each other in this thing. Another object appears, and it has a pointy end on its body. It starts picking away at it. They're harming each other. And just like that, look at that. A serial killer mask just swipes across the screen, and yeah, even that thing stares at you. And then out of nowhere, those two objects just expand out of nowhere. And then the second biggest offender on this logo, this thing just jarringly slams right into your view, staring at you with giant eyes. And not only that, but it's flinging and vibrating as its eyes dilate. Just like that angry face, it feels like it's getting ready to attack you. It reminds myself of my blood parrot fish, who absolutely hated my guts. It would do that thing whenever I'd make eye contact with it. And then out of nowhere, for a split second, those two objects grow giant eyes out of nowhere. And then that thing, now we were talking about, just like the eyeball at the start, bam, it rams right into your screen. And just like that, at the very end, all of those freaking characters you just saw, including that damned angry face and the thing we just talked about, immediately fly back. That face, by the way, it's still screaming at you. The good news here is that they're only on the screen for about half a second before the final product shows up. And you'd think this be the end of it, right? Well, are you serious? They're gonna flash one last character out at you just to mock you one last time. And then afterwards, it just fades out. Like nothing happened. It just fades out. You know? That's really all there is to talk about, you know? The thing just comes in, blasts in, out of nowhere. It flashes all these horrifying characters in your face for a good 20 seconds. And at the end, instead of any explanation or whatever, it fades out. That's it. It's done. And it just leaves you with this extremely unsettled feeling because you got a whole bunch of little CGI characters that are trying to attack you and such. Giant eyes, violence, you've got it all. This is single-handedly the freakiest logo I've ever seen. And if anything takes the cake in the future, if I ever find anything as freaky as this, you bet your rear end we will revisit this countdown. But for now, we are right at the end. Let's get you guys back to the studio so I can sign you off and get you out of here and on with your day.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. It's finally over. This stupid special is finally done, and you can go and do whatever you want now. If you watch this thing from start to finish without breaks or doing anything else, you are the real MVP. You have a whole lot more patience and a much bigger attention span than I do. As previously mentioned, we will do a follow-up to this sometime in the future after the rebrands, talking about the dishonorable mentions on this thing, but as for now, I really don't want to do another one of these logo specials. There's way too much on the docket that I need to get produced. We need to get into that right now. Thank you for joining us. Good night. Remember that Jesus is King, and God bless each and every one of you. Have a good night, everybody.
Alex Mack loving son of a bitch.